Thank you for joining us back from a quick short break. Thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and pass it to my colleague, Allison Briseno.
Hello, everyone. I am very excited. I'm Allison Briseno. I'm very excited to introduce Dr. Molly Ness today. Driven by a belief in the transformative power of literacy, Dr. Ness is dedicated to enhancing reading experiences for learners of all ages. With her background as a former university professor and extensive experience as a reading clinician and researcher, her approach is rooted in the latest research findings, emphasizing the intricate processes our brains undergo when decoding, comprehending, and generally engaging with text. At the heart of her teaching philosophy lies a deep-rooted belief in the transformative power of literacy. She views reading not just as a skill, but as a gateway to understanding, empathy, and lifelong learning. From her early days as a middle school teacher in Oakland to her tenure as a university professor, she has consistently championed the importance of brain-based reading instruction. Welcome, and thank you so much, Dr. Molly Ness, and I have put the link to her website in the chat.
Well, thank you. Let me just get going there. Well, thank you so much. I am so excited to be here, and this is for me literally a homecoming. I have called the East Coast my home for several decades now, but I am originally a California girl born in Marin County, and then came back to begin my teaching career in Oakland and then taught in Los Angeles. So California is near and dear to my heart, so I'm thrilled to be joining you from the East Coast, where it is 7:30 on a Friday night. And if that lets you know how committed I am to literacy, while most people are either heading out for the night, I am here with you to talk about language comprehension. So you've got my website and a couple of notes about some of the resources. If you go to the top menu bar, you'll see a part that says clients. If you click on clients, you'll come up to this queue for the password. The password is literacy, super secret password, in all caps. And some of the resources that I am pulling on from tonight, or I should say this afternoon for you, can be accessed that way. So please feel free to take a look at that on your own time and enjoy what is there. And you heard a little bit about my career in education. Started as a classroom teacher in Oakland, spent almost 2 decades as a university professor. But really my work as a literacy advocate and more importantly as a reading geek started at a very young age. I found this gem of a picture in my parents' attic. And if you can't see the typewritten bottom, it has faded over the years. It says, "I love my library because I like to be in the AV club." And if you are not a child of the 80s like I am, you may be unfamiliar with the AV club, the Audiovisual Club. We were the kids who got training to help the teacher when the film strip went beep. We advanced it. We changed light bulbs for overhead projectors. Here I am in my school library in front of the old listening station. And this is, if I were to ask you based on my fashion what the year is, this would be 1986. So it is no surprise that somebody who started in the AV club and was very at home in the school library ended up as a classroom teacher and a university professor and a lifelong reading geek. So here tonight, I am going to geek out about read alouds and why are they so important, particularly now. Obviously, they're not a new thing, but I'm hoping in the course of the next hour, you will walk away with new research supporting them, some pretty mind-blowing stuff out there. We're going to talk about why read alouds in this moment where the science of reading just feels like it is at fever pitch level for conversation. We'll talk about really how to maximize the effectiveness of read alouds. And then I'll touch a little bit on reading aloud across content areas. So my work today is really to do this. It's really to explain to you and convince you that this 1985 quote, which comes from A Nation of Readers, an relatively old. I shouldn't say 1985 is old because that means I'm old. But this classic report several decades ago told us that reading aloud is the single most important activity to build knowledge and reading success. We've known this for a long time. Why read alouds? Why now? And what have we learned since 1985? Well, when we talk about read alouds, really we are talking about language comprehension. And I want to really clearly start by operationalizing what we mean by language comprehension. I'm so grateful that we're starting to have conversations in the science of reading, not just about phonics and decoding, the word identification skills of lifting the words off the page, but we're now starting to see some of the conversation shifting towards language comprehension, because as we all know, it is far more than just picking words off the page to make meaning from text, but really it is language comprehension, which Hoover and Tunmer of the original Simple View of Reading explain as the ability to extract and construct both meaning that is literally there as well as inferred. It is the idea that the words that we see on the page represent speech ideas, and that you have to be able to meaningfully use and interact with language in order to make sense of what is literally stated, as well as inferred statements. Like if I were to say to your classroom, the grocery store was a zoo, do they understand the inference there? Do they understand that that doesn't mean there was a zebra in the produce section, but rather it means, the lines were long, the parking lot was crazy. So read alouds really are one of the most vital things in conversations about the science of reading, particularly with regard to language comprehension. And when we talk about language comprehension, this is probably just another different way to see the sub skills that go into language comprehension. And as I get into the research around read alouds, you'll see that all of these actually have a pretty rigorous research base based on some longstanding stuff and some new stuff. So let me take you back in time. You've already seen me in 1986. Here I am, my first year of teaching, 1999, Oakland, California. I did Teach for America right out of college, thinking I was just going to do it for a little bit before I went on to law school. Well, we're now 25 years out, and I think my father has finally accepted the fact that I am not going to law school. This education thing, like this is it for me. So a little bit about the context of my school. My students were at the time ELDs level 1 and 2. There were about 12 different languages in my classroom: Arabic, Cantonese, Cambodian, many others, of course. And like all first-year teachers, there was so much that I didn't know. My school was built for about 700 or 800 people. There were probably at the time 12 or 1,300 of us. And we had a block in the middle of the day that every 6th, 7th, and 8th grader went to the cafeteria and sort of blacktop courtyard all at once. So you can imagine the chaos that ensued when all of these preteens and teens came back in after lunch, all amped up, ready to talk about, the lunchroom drama and what was going on. And so what I did to welcome them back into my classroom was a read aloud. I basically did it because my kids needed that, like, calm your bodies, calm your minds. Let's get back to focusing on learning for the afternoon. I just did it as sort of a transitional activity without really knowing the value of it. And I did it every week by I was reading aloud from chapter books mostly. And every Sunday I would look through the chapter book and I would say to myself, here are the pages I'm going to cover, or here are the chapters I'm going to look at. Maybe I would choose a vocabulary word or two, but I wasn't really explicitly planning those read alouds. So a few years ago, much to my delight, a former student reached out to me. She was my favorite student. We all know as teachers, you're not supposed to have favorite students, but here is my favorite student, Samindi, who reached out to me through LinkedIn. a few years back and said, Miss Ness, I doubt you remember me, but I remember you. Of course, I did remember her. She went on to tell me what she had done with her life since leaving my 6th grade classroom. She had graduated high school. She had gone on to UC Berkeley. She's now living in Arizona, working in the field of public health. And she remembered all of the titles that I had read to the class in her 6th grade year. And of course, I had forgotten some of these titles, but she reminded me that we read Tales of a 4th Grade Nothing, and we read The Outsiders, and we read Frindle, which Frindle was brand new at the time. That really makes me feel old. And if you look at the copy of Tales of a 4th Grade Nothing that we read, this was the one that I had as a kid, where it was $1.25. And so we read all of these over the course of the year. And as I explained, I sort of just used it as a transitional activity, didn't really do much instructionally around it, but could see my kids just needing that time to sort of focus, regroup, and get ready to put the drama of the playground away in an effort to move forward with learning. So I was on the Science of Reading podcast. If you're not familiar with it, it's from Amplify. It's a really fantastic podcast. They are always having just amazingly thoughtful researchers and thought leaders. And what I talked about was pulled from my experience, and sort of what prompted me to write the book that I'm presenting from tonight was not really knowing the intentionality that needed to be there to plan a read aloud that really maximized language comprehension. And again, I am not in any way throwing shade at those of us who, just sort of wing it with our read alouds, because I did the same. But now that I know how much intentionality really needs to go into it, I can move to a place where I'm really maximizing those language comprehension benefits. And that's where we'll go for the rest of our time together. Well, it sounds pretty straightforward when we think about what a read aloud is, but I really want to make sure that when we talk about a read aloud, we are talking about conversation and engagement. We are talking about a shared activity, which is an exchange of language. It's the ping pong or the serve and volley of language all around a high quality text. And that text can be a classic narrative picture book. It can be a poem. It can be a novel in verse. It can be a speech, as we will talk about later when we talk about reading aloud in content areas. So don't sort of limit high quality text to picture books or middle grade text, but really high quality text in general. So let me start with some of the research around read alouds. A couple of things that I always tell folks: if you are a reading geek like myself and you want some of these articles as I reference them, please feel free to reach out to me. Most of them are behind academic paywalls, and I like to think of myself as like the Robin Hood of reading research, taking from the rich and giving to the poor. The teachers, of course, we're the poor because we should have access to all of this knowledge that exists in these academic journals. The great irony is my sister is actually a copyright lawyer, and so when I tell her I'm taking research and sending it out to teachers, she's ready to throw me in copyright prison. But if you are interested in any of these, don't hesitate to reach out to me. So let's start with some of the research that you instinctually know. I share this as a way to sort of affirm what many of us at gut level know. We know about the linguistic and academic benefits of read aloud. So I'm just giving you some of the citations behind what you already know. And isn't it validating when you sort of get I sort of knew that there were benefits, and now here's the research that's telling me that. So we know that when we read aloud to our kids, we increase their self-efficacy, their visions of themselves as readers, their likelihood that they will continue to read. I certainly experienced this in my classroom. We would read a book like Frindle, and my students would say, well, does that author have any more? And then you direct them to the entire shelf of the classroom library, where Andrew Clements has many other ones. We know that students who are read to have better academic achievement, larger vocabularies, better comprehension skills. So we're getting at some of the importance of background knowledge and comprehension in general. They're particularly fruitful for students who have developmental language delays or developmental language disorders, as well as our multilingual learners. We know that when students are read to, we foster their higher order thinking skills, as well as give them a platform or a basis to jumpstart their independent writing. I'll talk a little bit more about reading aloud in content area classrooms, but there's some pretty compelling research that shows that not only do we see increases in kids' reading comprehension, but we also see knowledge acquired in content area classrooms when kids are read to. And then really all of this is getting at this robustness of expressive and receptive language, again, getting at that language comprehension. So that's sort of the stuff that most of us know already. There's also research showing that when we read aloud to young children, our emergent readers, we get benefits in their foundational literacy skills. So this meta-analysis, this study of several studies, looked at how young students' phonological awareness improves through read alouds. And I love this quote that Sandra Lennox wrote in this 2013 article, reminding us that read alouds turbocharge the development of emergent literacy skills in preschool children. So speaking of preschool children, let me show you two different groups of brain scans. I'm pulling from research from John Hutton, who is a pediatrician at the Children's Hospital, I believe it's in Cincinnati, where there's a very well-established literacy clinic. And I want to be very clear that you are looking at 4-year-old brains, and these are two different groups of kids. Each of these scans, the kids who are in red and then the kids who are in blue, they're actually a compilation of about 40 different brain scans themselves. So we're not yet at the sort of sophistication where we look at one brain scan. This is a group of 40 kids. So I'll show them to you again. So just take a look at the red and the blue. Now, if I were to ask you, you might say, well, you know, the blue looks like these kids, these 4-year-olds, are using more of their brains, whereas the red kids are activating sort of more focal parts of the brain, more concentrated. And let me show you the conditions. I'm pulling from two different articles that started in peer-reviewed journals and then were appeared in things like CNN. That shows that lower preschool brain development occurs with regard to screen time. So let's take a look at these kids. Again, this group of 44-year-olds. These are children who are read to on a daily basis. And what we're starting to see is activation at 4 years old of what later becomes the reading circuitry. So we see that when these kids are read to, they are literally starting to activate the portions of the brain that will then serve as their foundational literacy centers, the occipital lobes and the areas on the left side of the brain, the Broca's area and the Wernicke's area. Now, contrast this to the same age of kids, another 44-year-olds. These are kids who spend up to 2 hours a day on devices. And that's tablets, gaming systems, TV. And what we see here, more is not better here, more is just more. More is mass disorganization, chaotic structure, no activation of the parts that will later serve as the foundations for the reading brain. So we can literally start to see that when our preschoolers are read to, they start to activate and build the parts that serve as the reading circuitry versus kids who are spending up to 2 hours a day on devices. And actually 2 hours a day, unfortunately, is on the low end for the typical screen usage of preschoolers today. And in fact, we now have data showing even kids as young as 36 months. We think of how much is lost, how many language opportunities are lost when kids spend just an hour at 36 months. Look at what they're missing. They're missing almost 400 adult words, 68 conversational turns, So this is one of the reasons why the American Academy of Pediatrics is continually revising their screen time recommendations for our babies, our preschoolers, our toddlers. So let me keep going and remind you that the body of research around read alouds, it's been there for a long time, since 1985, and we are continuing to see it added to. Even today, these are some articles that have come up pretty recently. But I want to also remind you that the benefits of read alouds are not just linguistic or academic or sort of some of those traditional literacy ones. We see socio-emotional benefits of when kids are read to. All of these research articles look at the use of narrative text. Well, narrative text often puts us in the position where we have to think about a situation from a different point of view or from a character's perspective. And we know that narrative text typically helps people develop empathy. So these research teams, you can see a few different research teams, used read alouds with kids who were experiencing more than just sort of the classroom behavior of, not raising their hands, but some really challenging behaviors. And we started to see that just the read alouds improved their conflict resolution, their sensitivity to others, and their empathy. And certainly our world could use a little bit more empathy today. And this 2012 study looked at a population of students who really had some challenging behaviors, some oppositional defiance. And we saw this low cost, easy to implement read aloud protocol. Kids had less negative interactions, fewer outbursts, and more self-regulation, more ability to sort of control their own behaviors. So now I get to the stuff that I just think is mind-blowing, because we are now starting to see physiological benefits to listening to read alouds. So I'm pulling from two different studies. Both came out of children in the hospital. The first study, the 2019 study, came from the University of Virginia, the Neonatal Intensive Care Unit. So this study was actually created by a nurse practitioner who wanted to help mothers of babies that were in the NICU. If you have not personally seen the NICU, you've likely seen the NICU on a hospital drama like Grey's Anatomy. Babies can be, as small as your hand. They can be 2 pounds. They are hooked up to all these monitors and in the incubator. And the research shows that mothers who have children that go to the NICU rather than going home as a tradition, as many babies do, they have higher rates of postpartum depression. Kind of makes sense if you have a stressful experience and your baby is, you're worried about it medically, you're having to deal with hospital bills, you're not sure if it's safe to touch your baby because of all these, tubes and monitors and incubators and such. And so this nurse practitioner, wanted to address, well, what could we do to decrease mothers' postpartum depression? And so she created a very simple treatment. Well, I'll just have the mothers read to their babies in the NICU. And she created 3 different conditions based on the levels of medical robustness for the babies. So there were babies that were 24 weeks old. They were, the size of the palm of your hand. They were whisper read to for 10 minutes, all the way up to babies that were medically robust or they were about to be discharged, almost normal birth weight. They were read to for longer durations and at a louder volume. And here's what happened. First of all, significant decrease in mothers' postpartum depression. Every mother after the experiment reported that they would continue to read to their baby after they took them home. And wouldn't our classrooms be even more beautiful places if every parent read to their child? But what we also saw was that babies underwent physiological changes. Their blood oxygen rates increased and their heart rates decreased. In other words, they went through medical homeostasis. They went through a process by which the body self-regulated better. And those benefits happened, they occurred not just during the read aloud, but for a half an hour to an hour after the read aloud. this study, a 2012 study, I just love the, 2021 study. I love its title, Storytelling Increases Oxytocin and Positive Emotions and Decreases Cortisol and Pain in Hospitalized Children. Let me explain how this study happened. So this was a study of children who were in the pediatric unit, not, because they broke their arm, but cancer, sickle cell anemia, longer durations. And the medical team decided to create two different protocols, two different treatments. There were kids who listened to read alouds, so they listened to storytelling and read alouds, and then there were kids who did riddles, puzzles, games. And what happened, I'll walk through each row. So let's take a look at the top row. The blue kids are the kids who listen to stories. The red kids are the kids who did riddles and puzzles and games. Oxytocin is your feel-good chemical. When you hug somebody you love, when you snuggle with your dog on the weekend, and you get that warm, fuzzy feeling, that's oxytocin. You can see an increase more sharply with the kids who listen to stories and books. And then the middle row is cortisol. Cortisol is your stress responder. It's your fight or flight. It's what kicks in when the tiger is chasing you and then leaves you really depleted afterwards. You can see sharper decrease with the story listening and storytelling group. And then finally, kids completed the pain scale. If you've been to the doctor's office, you've seen the pain scale. It's just a scale of smiley faces. The doctor says, what's your level of pain? And you point to, the green face that's happy and feels great, all the way to 10, which is a red face that's grimacing and showing pain. So kids literally self-reported a decrease in pain just by listening to books. So if listening to stories and listening to books can have such implications in hospitals, what can it do in our classrooms? And I love this quote from that study, which talks about the anxiety-provoking hospital environment and that listening to these books elicits positive physiological, psychological changes. So again, we are now literally seeing physical changes with read alouds. And interestingly, there are now different organizations which are using listening to read alouds to help all sorts of people who are struggling with aging and dementia, people who are who are getting therapy for PTSD and overcoming addiction. Because what we're seeing is when you listen to those read alouds, your oxytocin, that feel-good chemical increases. And so if that helps kids in the hospital, how might it help soldiers returning from battle or people who are struggling with addiction? So all sorts of really compelling arguments, and so important are read alouds that the American Academy of Pediatrics, the same group that helps us know when to provide which vaccine for what age child, includes them. And this particular statement was actually just re-released last week. There's you can download a 90-page policy statement with even more compelling research, hot off the press from the American Academy of Pediatrics. And I also want to be really clear that read alouds, I focused on so much of the research just at early childhood, but we know the power of read alouds, like I saw in my middle school classroom, certainly happens in secondary classrooms, that when teachers read aloud, what we're doing is we're removing the complications of decoding and word identification and getting kids at the secondary middle school level the ability to concentrate on comprehension. And so it's particularly important for our kids who are in middle schools and giving them sort of leveling the playing field with reducing their reading struggles. So now that we've got the data, let's look at some of the trends around read alouds. Let me first show you these two studies, very recent. These studies surveyed teachers and asked them over a particular period, I believe it was 4 weeks, what books did you read aloud in your classroom? And they asked hundreds of teachers to respond. They, I think, got almost 1,000 teachers to respond, and then each teacher reported how many books they had read and what the titles were. So they had this huge database of texts that were read aloud. And they did discourse analysis, or they just examined the patterns among those titles and found a huge reliance on fiction text. And they discovered that much like I had done, I chose Tales of the Fourth Grade Nothing to read to my kids because it was a book I had loved. Well, teachers were reading books that were familiar, or some of those classic books. And for the most part, they were pretty old books, about 25 years old, and quite narrow in their focus on inclusion. And if there were holiday books, they tended to be Christian holiday books. And I don't put this up as a way to say, like, there's no time and place for The Snowy Day or Corduroy or what have you, but as a way to remind us, can we be a little bit more forward thinking about what we're using in our classrooms? Can we move more towards nonfiction or informational text? Can we challenge ourselves to read books that are more current than the average text here being 25 years old? And I know it is impossible as a teacher with a very crowded plate to keep up with the unbelievable number of books that are constantly coming out. So in the appendices of the book that is being raffled off, I've got a whole list of where I get my books from, award-winning books, podcasts, all sorts of ways to help you with doing the hard work of choosing texts. There are people that's their sweet spot, so let's lean in on them and use some of those resources. But I'll let you take a look quickly at what the pattern showed with text selection. And look at that, 94% almost inclusion of fiction text. So again, I point this out as a way to sort of help your self-reflection. What are you reading aloud? Could you be more inclusive or broaden what you're reading aloud to get to the richness of children's books that are currently out there? When I came to this particular study, I really had that, well, this was me. This was me, as I started off by saying that I didn't plan my read aloud other than how many minutes, maybe how many pages. And that's very much a trend. And I want to sort of challenge this trend. Well, what does this mean? Like, so what? Is there a cost to not planning the read alouds? And the answer is, when we don't plan our read alouds, we miss out on instructional opportunities. So this 2021 study contrasted teacher language with read alouds that were planned and then those impromptu read alouds, and found, not surprisingly, that those unplanned read alouds, teacher language was more surface level. When we asked questions, they were more sort of simplistic. The things that we had kids do with the text was also more simplistic. So in a nutshell, many of us are not planning our read alouds, just like I did. And when we don't, we miss the opportunities to really dive into the intentionality of language comprehension. We also know that our numbers are certainly could be improved with how many people are reading aloud on a daily basis. And we certainly see the decline of read alouds in upper elementary school, of course, and in middle school. And if you're not familiar with the Scholastic Kids and Family Report and then School Report, it's a biannual report that intentionally surveys about 3,000 participants that are very representative of our census data, and really does a nice job painting the literacy landscape both in homes and in schools. So many of us know Scholastic for, you know, the book fairs and Clifford the Red Dog, but they also have a really meaningful research branch. So take advantage of some of their resources as well. So why are we having these conversations now? Read alouds have been around forever. You know, now the big focus is the science of reading. I'm often asked, well, read alouds, like, are they allowed in the science of reading? Do they still align? And whenever I'm asked that question, first of all, I want to make sure that we're all on the same page with what we mean about the science of reading. Because if you were to survey 20 teachers, you probably would get 20 different answers about what the science of reading is. And I actually kind of blame the media for focusing so much of the conversation about the science of reading on word identification and phonics and decoding. And those of us who understand the science of reading understand that it really is this broad body of research that pulls from about 5 decades of scientific knowledge. It's interdisciplinary and pulls from all of these different levels of expertise. And it's not a US only phenomenon. I just rolled off of the board of directors for the International Literacy Association, and my colleagues were from Australia and New Zealand and Ireland, and they told me they are having the same conversations overseas about the science of reading that we are in the States. So it is a global conversation. And so ubiquitous in conversations about the science of reading is Hollis Scarborough's 2001 reading rope, in which she tries to depict how multifaceted reading development is. Again, so much of the conversation and attention has been on the lower part, which is that word recognition, lifting words off the page, but we cannot overlook language comprehension, which I started out by defining. And when I look at all of these strands of language comprehension, background knowledge and vocabulary, my question is always, well, how else do we get to them? How else do we facilitate language structures and model verbal reasoning and build vocabulary without the read aloud? So does a read aloud fit in the science of reading? Well, first of all, the science of reading is a body of research, and I just went through painstakingly a really vast body of research around read alouds. So absolutely. And now that we know that, we can really focus on how to maximize those. Well, one of the reasons to read aloud is because of the richness of vocabulary. I love this notion of picture books as lexical reservoirs, that when we read picture books to our children, we are giving them exposure to vocabulary that they are unlikely to hear on an everyday basis without them. And as an example of that, I love this page. You might recognize Pizza by William Steig. It's a super, super simple book. Pete wants to go outside and play. You can see his baseball glove and ball, but it's rainy out, so he has to do something else. Look at this one sentence. This book I might read to 3-year-olds, to 4-year-olds. Super simple book, but look at the richness of vocabulary in just that one page. Pete's father can't help noticing how miserable he is. And there have been studies that quantify both the number and the quality of vocabulary that kids hear on an everyday basis. The number 1 and 2 ways that kids hear language is adult conversation, just being around in the world every day. And then number 2 is digital access, TVs, video games, all those sorts of things. And there are researchers who have literally looked at how many words kids hear and the quality of those words without the read aloud. And you see a significant increase in the sophistication and the number of words that kids hear because of the read aloud. Now, as I said earlier, my colleagues overseas are having these conversations about the science of reading. And they're telling me that we have to make sure that we are not pushing away time for things that can't be quantified or measured or assessed. And for so long, we've sort of seen the read aloud as like this luxury, or I'll get to it if I have time, or it's a time filler, rather than really the cornerstone of literacy instruction. And I love this reminder that we really do have to push against the notion that book reading, doesn't have validity, and we're just going to push it aside because if it's not valid and it can't be tested, then we don't have the time and space for this. So consider this as a warning to continue to prioritize the read aloud because of all of the reasons that I presented in that research. And even Tim Shanahan reminds us that we really have to understand how to use read alouds to leverage, connect, and build knowledge so that it translates into gains in comprehension. And that's where we're going to go with the planning protocol that I use with read alouds. So before we get into really like explicitly planning around read aloud, let me give you a couple sort of broad tips. I'll talk through the first 4 tips somewhat quickly, and then really we'll spend the bulk of the time looking at what does explicitly planning a read aloud look like. Let's start with some pretty cool data around why we should read aloud to kids from sophisticated text. I'm pulling from a 1984 meta-analysis, and I'll show you the citation on the next slide. Let me just walk through what you're seeing. The bottom axis, the x-axis, is grade level. The y-axis, or the vertical axis, is comprehension. And what you can see here is that our listening comprehension outpaces our reading comprehension until about 7th or 8th grade. What we can see here is that kids in 1st grade and 2nd grade and 3rd grade and 4th grade are able to understand texts that are orally delivered to them that far outpace what their reading ability is. And I'll show it to you in another way. Rather than looking at grade level here, we're looking at age. The blue bar is listening comprehension. So these are kids listening comprehension in blue, and then the red is reading comprehension. Same way to show, or same idea, but just depicted differently, that until kids are middle school, 13-ish, 7th and 8th grade, our listening comprehension outpaces our reading comprehension. So this is one of the reasons why, particularly in our early childhood classrooms, we want to read aloud to kids from sophisticated text. We want to read aloud from text that is intentionally above their grade level, because kids can access it because of their listening comprehension. So if you in your schools or districts are moving towards some of the knowledge-based curriculum, CKLA and Wit and Wisdom and Bookworms and some of those other ones, one of the things that I often hear general first reactions is the texts are really sophisticated. The texts are complicated. Yes, they are, and they're intentionally so, because they are pulling into this notion about kids' listening comprehension outpacing their reading comprehension. Another key point is thinking about the ways in which we're going to support our multilingual learners during read alouds. And I'm happy to share this 2023 article, which gives us the good news that read alouds, of course, are equally beneficial for our multilingual learners because of their language comprehension opportunities. And what might we need to do a little bit differently? Well, here are some ideas. Vocabulary instruction should be in the moment during the read aloud, meaning we're not going to define the word after the read aloud. We're going to need to increase our students' opportunities to, in the moment, take turns, to share ideas, to make meaning, to construct knowledge, to have noticings and observations about word meaning. So the good news is everything that goes into an intentionally planned read aloud for all of our students will be equally as powerful with just a little bit more of the oral pausing and in the moment initiation for our multilingual students. Again, a 2023 article, I believe it's from the Reading Teacher. Another thing that I'm going to get to in a minute is talking about read alouds in content areas. We so often think about read alouds just within our ELA blocks. And we know that students all across the country, the vast majority of their instructional time is the ELA block. Nationwide, the average is about 120 minutes a day. And when we so double down on ELA instruction, well, we know we have a limited time in schools. So what is lost? What's pushed aside? And here we see what's typically pushed aside is those electives or extracurriculars or science or social studies or arts or music. And we know that when we read aloud to kids in content areas, we see gains in reading comprehension. This is work shared by Natalie Wexler in her book. She wrote the foreword for my book, and she shows that when we increase content exposure in social studies by 15 minutes a day, it correlates to reading growth. Because when we give kids that knowledge, well, their background knowledge then serves as a bolster for reading comprehension. So more reason to read aloud, not just in ELA, but in science and social studies. And we also have to be mindful of the quality of language that we are using. And when I work with pre-service teachers, one of the things that I have them do is a transcript analysis of their own read alouds, because our quality of talk matters. And what we are trying to do is get to those levels of analysis and connections and synthesis, rather than the lower levels of clarification or repeating. And that the richer our language is, not surprisingly, the more kids benefit, particularly our emerging readers, and particularly as these particular studies looked at our Spanish-speaking students. So I also want to encourage us to, as I sort of alluded to a little bit later, think about the read aloud not just in the picture book, start to finish, as I'm here in front of kindergartners. Like, it's not always going to look that way, nor should it, because we get the same benefits when we do read alouds across content area in our secondary classrooms. And how might that look? Well, we might read aloud from speeches. If you're studying a particular historic figure, we might read their speeches or find newspaper articles from that time period. There are resources online that if you enter a date in history, you can find newspaper articles. What a great way to read aloud to them. I worked with a physical education teacher who was constantly changing games and sports every 3 or 4 weeks, and decided, rather than me just explaining the rules for badminton or volleyball, I'm actually going to read aloud from the US Volleyball Association guidelines and use those as a read aloud, because that essentially directions and how-to manuals. There's just so many different ways to incorporate read alouds that I think we have to kind of be a little bit more innovative and not just rely on the picture books, which of course are tried but true, but there's lots and lots of other opportunities. And as I mentioned, when we read aloud in content areas, our kids actually increase their content knowledge, particularly in math, which is probably one of the topics, the content areas that we read the least frequently in. But you can see what happens that when kids have math read alouds about picture book biographies of mathematicians or mathematical concepts, not only do we increase their mathematical literacy, but their computational skills, their vocabulary, their number identification, all of those things. And so a couple of ways that I like to read aloud, obviously there's so many great different picture books about mathematic figures. If you don't know the Sports Illustrated for Kids series, The Math of the Game, there are a whole series of them: basketball, the math of the game; football, the math of the game. This would be one of the things that I would absolutely get, particularly for my reluctant readers, as a way to hook them in and continue those read alouds. And in music, there's so many opportunities. I worked with a music teacher who found picture book versions of song lyrics. There are so many different song lyrics that have been translated. Even Coldplay now has a picture book. And this this music teacher, what she did was she literally read the lyrics and then had kids talk about, well, how might the music match the song? And then they listened to the song and they had conversations about how the two aligned and complemented each other. I've worked with history teachers who have used music as a way to showcase different historical movements and such. Again, so many opportunities in PE as well. Many of us know the alphabet series, but there's the whole alphabet series in sports, as well as lots of different books that are featuring characters who have overcome adversity. We are now going into the playoff series. My Orioles got knocked out the other night. If you watch baseball and you see signs, the umpire calling safe or out or what have you, where did those come from? They came from a man named William Hoy, who was a deaf baseball player and created these hand signs as a way for him to play in the major league. He is in the Baseball Hall of Fame, and it is a fantastic book, The William Hoy Story, as well as different books in art. So my point is there are tons of these resources. I've listed several of them in the book, but I want to get towards the let's now take a text and actually really explicitly plan it. So at this point, hopefully you are like nodding along. Yep, we got to do the read aloud. Not only do we have to do the read aloud, we want to do the read aloud. We know its power. We know our kids enjoy it. Most teachers, when I share this data, they're like, awesome, because you verified and validated something that I love doing and something that my kids respond well to. But knowing that our instructional time is precious, how are we going to maximize them? And that's where I want to go now. I do it in a 3-step process. So this 3-step process is somewhat similar to what we typically think about supporting readers before reading, during reading, and after reading. And so I'm going to walk through each of these 3 steps, and I'm going to do it with a sample text. I've chosen Knuffle Bunny just because it is a book that many of us are familiar with. So I don't have to waste a lot of time by telling you, but I will refresh your memory if you don't know. First of all, if it's making you crazy that I'm saying Knuffle and not Nuffle, it is, to settle the age-old debate, it is Knuffle Bunny. The author, Mo Willems, is Dutch. And in Dutch, the K is hard. And actually in Dutch, knuffle means hug. So if nothing else from me, you now know how to properly pronounce the title. It is not Knuffle Bunny, it's Knuffle Bunny. So as a reminder, Knuffle Bunny is about this little girl named Trixie who has her favorite stuffed animal that she takes everywhere. She wakes up one morning in the city and she and her dad go on an errand. You can see that dad has the laundry and Trixie has Knuffle Bunny. And mom stays behind. I like to think that mom stays behind and like goes to yoga or takes a luxurious bubble bath or something like that, while dad and Trixie go down the block through the park to this place called a laundromat. Well, when they get to the laundromat, dad does the work of sorting the lights and darks and finding a machine that doesn't eat your quarters. And on the way home, Trixie realizes something is wrong. She tries to communicate it to her dad. Her dad is not fluent in toddlerese. And so Trixie, feeling misunderstood, does what any toddler would do and has an epic meltdown. By the time they get home, Trixie's dad is not happy, as Trixie's not happy. Mom recognizes the situation, and this stuffed animal is so beloved and precious that the rest of the book is the family dropping everything, running back down through the block, down the block through the park, back to the laundromat where they search frantically and find Knuffle Bunny. So let's imagine this is our text. I just should have said that Knuffle Bunny are the first words Trixie ever said. So let's imagine we are doing this text. Again, I've just chosen it as one I can sort of quickly walk through, but the protocol that we're about to go through will work for any text, any grade level of students. So don't sort of pigeonhole yourself like, oh, she's just walking through an early childhood one. I'm a 5th grade teacher. Still the same protocol and still even the same for chapter books. So in step one, what I'm going to do is evaluate. This is the work that I do prior to my reading with kids. I'm going through the book and evaluating for stumbling blocks as well as opportunities. So what's going to trip my kids up, as well as what are the things I really want to lean into? What's the stuff I want to showcase? And then I also am evaluating for something called funds of knowledge. Now, we're often talking about background knowledge or topic knowledge. I also include funds of knowledge. Let me give a quick explanation about what I mean about funds of knowledge. It's actually research that came from 1992 by a group of researchers who were working with migrant students living on the Rio Grande Valley, Texas-Mexico border. And these were students who were high poverty students. They were from migrant families, not native English speakers. They were families that we so often look at with a deficit model. These kids, they don't go to the museum, they don't go, to Europe on summer vacation. So there's so much background knowledge they don't have. So we were typically looking at them with a deficit mindset. And this research team said, true, but they also have all of these amazing ways in which they navigate their world and their communities. So they would see things like somebody's car would break down and they couldn't afford to take it to the mechanic. So they would barter with their next door neighbor. You do my laundry and clean my house for the month and I'll fix your car, kind of thing. And so they talked about these as funds of knowledge, which is information that we all have that is essential to our culture, our house, our community, our neighborhood, and it helps me get by and make and understand my world. In an example that I always use of funds of knowledge, in America, if you meet somebody, you shake their hand. In Japan, if you meet somebody, you bow to them. In France, if you meet somebody at the Olympics, you might have done the two-cheek kiss. Well, how do we know that? We know that because those are funds of knowledge that we've all acquired by just being a part of our community, our neighborhood, our household. And so when I evaluate my text, I'm evaluating for all of that knowledge that if my kids don't have it, is potentially a comprehension breakdown. So what is it in Knuffle What's the breakdown? Well, first of all, you gotta know what a laundromat is. And not every kid does, because maybe you have a washer and dryer in your house, or maybe you just don't help with the laundromat. You don't go to the laundromat with your family. If you're not familiar with that place, that is a huge comprehension breakdown. So what could I do? If I've identified that as a comprehension breakdown, I might just show a Google image before we read the book. Guys, the setting of this book, one of the settings is a laundromat. Here's what a laundromat looks like. It's a place that you go to do your wash if you don't have a washer and dryer in your house. Some other funds of knowledge are urban environment, the landscape of this text, what it means to go down the block and through the park. This book also has very specific funds of knowledge about Trixie's family. Trixie's mom stays behind and her dad does the laundry. Well, if that's not what it looks like in your family, that's potentially a background knowledge gap or funds of knowledge that you might have to build or activate. What about how Trixie's dad tries to pick up on what Trixie's saying, because communication is so essential in that family. And this whole book resting on this stuffed animal is so important to Trixie that she takes it everywhere. Well, if you don't have a Lovey or a Stuffy or a Blanky or whatever in your family, again, a point of knowledge that is potentially a breakdown. So how do I come up with these? I ask myself some reflective questions as I'm evaluating the text. What's the book assume that I am, what does the book assume my kids need to know? Are there things in it that my kids might be unfamiliar with? And once I've identified them, what am I going to do to front load them to minimize them as a comprehension breakdown? So that's all my step number one. Step number two is explaining. This is the work that happens as I'm reading with my kids. And I'm really thinking about explaining two big buckets of things: vocabulary and point of clarification for comprehension breakdowns. Let's talk about first vocabulary. So it's often overwhelming to think there's so many words my kids don't know. How do I figure out what is essential? When I look at my texts, I look at words that I just got to explain in the moment and move on, but they're not really words that are worth a whole lot of time and attention. I can just explain it and move on. For example, I was reading a book and the word latrine was in the book. I can explain latrine is another word for bathroom and then move on. Versus my words to teach. If you're familiar with Isabel Beck's vocabulary tiers, tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3, tier 2 being those words that are in sophisticated vocabulary, these are the words that I want my kids to own and know and use. They're useful, they're engaging, they're words that my kids are going to have a reason and a purpose for using. So I focus on the words to teach. And in those words to teach, what do I do once I've identified them? I give my kids a student-friendly definition. That is something that I've rewritten in teacher-friendly, like short, simple, everyday language. I hook it to something that they already know, and I give it to them when I come to it in the text. So with that example of pizza, when I came to miserable, great word. Sophisticated, my kids already understand sad, so I can simply say it's another word for unhappy. I can restate it by saying, if you feel miserable, you feel awful or sad. So you can see that it's just a short little burst of vocabulary, because later I'm going to continue to come back to that vocabulary to give kids the multiple exposures that they need. The next thing that I'm going to do in the read aloud is I'm going to explain. I'm going to think through the points of confusion. Where are the parts in the text that comprehension is really tricky? And if I've identified those, what might I do to model my thinking through a think aloud? And if you're not familiar with a think aloud, chances are you've done them without knowing them, the term for it. Again, a really robust body of knowledge supporting think alouds. A think aloud is literally when I'm cracking open my head and talking through the invisible process that I'm doing, so my kids get a glimpse into my comprehension, and then they can emulate what I'm doing to understand a text with their text. It's first-person narrative language. What I do with my think alouds is I give my kids a heads up. Before I start reading, I'll say to them, sometimes you might see my finger on my side of my head. When you see that, I'm talking through my thinking. I'm letting you know all of the words that are going through my head as I'm reading to help me understand. But if my finger's not there, then I'm reading the book. I worked with a teacher who instead made a thinking crown and did it with that. So every time she had it on, she was thinking, and then she could pass it around to her kids so that they could take a turn and use those first-person narrative language sentence starters, where we're modeling how to make an inference, and we're modeling that we generate questions, and we're modeling that we're synthesizing. Again, you can see how these are all conversational, modeling through first-person narrative language. It's not me asking kids a question. I'm not checking their understanding. I'm modeling mine so that they are more likely to do the same. So in Knuffle Bunny, when Trixie and her dad go down the block, I might say, well, the author's giving me a clue here. I can infer from what I know and from the clues in the text that a block is how you measure spaces. So I'm modeling an inference. Or I might model the fact that Trixie must be frustrated, and I'm getting the sense that she feels frustrated because her dad can't understand her. So again, you can see that first person narrative language to model our thinking. And then in my final step, well, this is what I do after I finish the book. I'm going to think through 3 different potential areas and kind of come up with a menu of options for after my reading. Now, am I going to get to everything on the menu? Probably not. But I've got all of these different things I can pull from either immediately after the read aloud or in subsequent days after the read aloud. And I'm really looking at 3 different ways to engage and extend my kids' understanding and retention and connection to the text. Cross-curricularly, literacy opportunities, and then socio-emotional. Let's start with cross-curricular. So I ask myself some reflective questions to get at, well, how might I take the idea from the text or things that happen in the text and use it to connect different domains of knowledge, science and social studies and math and all of those things. Are there opportunities to connect this text to other content areas? Sometimes there are, and sometimes there aren't. If they're not there, I'm not going to force them. So I'm not going to force my kids to, count the blocks in Knuffle Bunny. But when we read this book, we often are talking at this time frame in a school about early geography skills. So maybe we make maps of Trixie's neighborhood, or we make maps of their own neighborhood. So you can see I'm sort of getting some early social studies. Now, this particular book doesn't have a ton of cross-curricular. Maybe you're more creative than I am and can come up with stuff, but you're seeing I'm not sort of forcing things if the opportunities are not there. I also think about authentic literacy opportunities. And we so often talk about literacy as reading and writing, when really it also includes listening and speaking. And some people even say it includes viewing. So I'm going to think through, how might I use authentic literacy to make meaning of this text? So I might come up with a menu of some options, again, not necessarily going to get to everything, but I might have kids do some character analysis, or they might make missing posters for Trixie's stuffed animal. Like when you drive through your neighborhood and you see somebody's put up a sign for their missing dog. Well, my kids could do the same, where they have to draw a picture of what it looks like, use their words to describe it. Or this book is about Trixie's first word, if it's appropriate for your kids and their family situations. Maybe they interview somebody at home about their first word. Or maybe we do a shared writing of rewriting the story from Knuffle Bunny's perspective. You can see that all of these are really grounded in authentic reading, writing, listening, and speaking. So it's not, take out a shoebox and make a cardboard diorama, but it's really hinging on authentic literacy. And again, I ask myself some reflective questions to get there. And then the last thing I think through is socio-emotional opportunities. And if you're not familiar with CASEL, the Center for Advancing Socio and Emotional Learning, the way that they define socio-emotional is really, I think it's really nicely done. They talk about self-awareness, self-management, decision-making, awareness, and relationship skills. And so I ask myself some reflective questions to see if there are opportunities in my text to pull in any of those CASEL tenets. So if I were using that same text, Knuffle Bunny, maybe I have my kids build their self-awareness and say, tell a neighbor about a time you felt like Trixie. How did your body feel? How did your mind feel? Or problem solving. How might you handle that situation again? Might you, what was a word to describe Trixie? So again, a menu of options based on how much time you have. So what we've just done is we've taken one text and we've gone through these 3 different steps to really maximize language comprehension. We are, first of all, front-loading intentionally so that we are reducing comprehension breakdowns, because we're really going to critically evaluate, what do kids need to know prior to this text? Then as we read, we're really going to focus in on vocabulary, words to teach versus words to just explain and move on. And then I'm going to use that read aloud as a way to showcase my comprehension, my metacognition through think alouds, so that I am giving my kids an example of comprehension maneuvers that help make meaning of a text, increasing their understanding of not just the text itself, but the likelihood that they'll take similar behaviors and apply them to their reading. And then after we've done the reading, we're looking for authentic literacy opportunities, cross-curricular support, and socio-emotional support. And the way that I do it is with a template like this. I will share it with your conference organizers, and it is also available on that website that I shared out with you, which I believe I will share out with you again. So yours for the taking. This is just sort of my thought catcher as I plan my read alouds that really make sure I am maximizing my language comprehension opportunities. And I want to just close with some of the words by Carol Diego, who I know has been a long-term loyal advocate of California reading. And this sentence hangs above my desk because everything I do, whether it's writing or being in classrooms or teaching teachers, it is all geared to this. If we're not helping students become confident habitual readers, I don't know what business we're in. I just love this as a helping me. This is my North Star for all of my work in literacy, and I know is the North Star for the work that you are doing in your classrooms on the West Coast. And I'm so grateful for your time, not only tonight, but mostly for your time helping kids become confident and habitual readers. So I'll show my contact information again and encourage you to reach out for any questions or follow-up conversations or requests for articles. Again, I will happily share them. And I'm also very grateful to the conference organizers for being such fantastic people, asking me to share some knowledge with you too, and have just done such a bang up job in terms of organizing. So thank you so much. Enjoy your evening. And it's been a pleasure to join California, my original home, if not, there in person, but at least virtually.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ness. That was an absolutely wonderful presentation. We're so grateful. It's great learning for all of us. And we will be giving away 2 of Dr. Ness's books, thanks to Solution Tree, the publisher. So we're excited about that. And we're going to take about a 10-minute break. We're coming back at 5:50. So go ahead and set your alarms, your phones, and we will be back at 5:50. Thanks, everyone.
Well, I got there just in time for the end of it. Want to do a protein with it?
Please join us in 2 minutes. Thank you. Our conference will reconvene in 1 minute. Join us then for our diverse author panel. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and pass it to my colleague, Carla Peterson. Carla, you are on mute. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Good evening. I'm Carla Peterson, CRA Co-Chapter Liaison of the Northern Region. It is my pleasure to introduce the diverse author panel today. Dr. Virginia Lowe Hagan, educator, author, and Eureka Book Award Committee Administrator, will be the panel moderator for the diverse author panel. She will be joined by amazing authors, Lauren Emmons, Idris Goodwin, Ellie Therese, and Natasha Triplett. They will be sharing more about themselves and their books. So let's get started.
Hi, I assume that somebody will be spotlighting all the authors. Is that happening?
Yes, we're about to. Thank you.
Okay. So we will get started in a minute. I'm highlighted. Yay. We have 3 more folks. I apologize. I just got a last minute announcement that Lauren Emmons will not be joining us tonight. Unfortunately, she is sick. So she won't be here, but we should have Idris, Natasha, and Ali should be here. So if we could get them spotlighted as well, that would be fantastic. So while we get folks up, I'll go ahead and there's Natasha, yay. Well, I'll go ahead and get started, and I'll offer my own introduction while we get folks up. So I'm Dr. Virginia Lowe Hagan. I've been involved with this wonderful CRA group for many years now. In addition, I've been a K-8 teacher myself, and a teacher educator at various institutions, mainly at San Diego State. Recently, I've taught I was in charge of the credential programs, ETP, all that stuff. And then several years ago, I got invited to start up our SDSU Apita Center at San Diego State. So I'm doing that. I'm currently now have been promoted to the executive director of Annapisi Campus Affairs at San Diego State. So I'm excited about that as well. And also in my spare time, when I'm not wrangling my naughty dog, I am also a children's book author, and I have right now over 450 books. My most recent book is A is for Asian American and Born Reading. So I've written a lot about Asian American culture and other cultures, and I also have a nonfiction series with Sleeping Bear Press and Cherry Lake. So I'm excited about that. So we'll go ahead and start. Natasha, you're up. I see you. I'm just gonna call you all out as you get popped in. The last person we're looking for is Idris, by the way. But Natasha, I'll go ahead and get you started. Tell us about yourself. Besides the fact that you look very, I love your hair.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me. I am a children's book author, and I have written 2 books, and I've got a couple more in the hopper. I live in Northern California, and I am very, very passionate about diverse representation in children's books. My background is very diverse. My hair comes from a mix of my Jamaican and Jewish culture background. And one of the other unique things about my identity is that I was adopted as a baby into a Dutch family. And so there's a lot going on there. It makes for a lot of really fun intersecting topics to write about, because I feel like as we continue to, travel through this time that we're in, diversity amongst children is just happening more and more. And so there's a lot of kids that have very mixed identities. And so I love that. I love that it allows us to learn from each other. So I'm very passionate about cultural representation in books. Very passionate about speaking out against banned books and banning authors from doing school visits. And I had my own incident that was very unfortunate. But I think kids deserve our best, and I'm really excited to be part of this group. And I can't wait to learn from the rest of my colleagues who are on this panel. And thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. So, Ali, please tell us about yourself as well. And I see I love all your background. Ali so graciously sent me some of her a uterus. I think you emailed and said, "Would you like a crocheted uterus?"
Yeah. So Virginia, we were just right in it. Yeah.
Who wouldn't want a crocheted uterus? Of course I do. But what I didn't expect was that it's so soft. I love it.
Yes. Yes. I'll talk about a little bit about that more because some people might be saying, what? But hi, everyone. My name is Ali Therese. I'm a middle grade and YA author, and I'm so happy to be here today. In terms of the panel, I'm a physically disabled author, and I write middle grade comedies that all deal with health equity issues. And what I'm going to talk about is my debut, which is called Free Period. It's out now from Scholastic. This is a middle grade comedy about friendship and period equity. And when I say period, I'm talking about menstrual blood, hence the crochet uteruses. So this book is about a couple of chaos monsters who fight to get maxi pads in all school bathrooms for all students who menstruate. It is a fast-paced, fun romp for middle grade readers that is full of wildly weird crafts like the crochet uterus, delightfully disgusting desserts like maxi pad cupcakes, and elite fart jokes. My goal as an author is to get kids laughing and having fun to break the ice around tough issues. And something would be a bonus for me is to remind them that advocacy doesn't have to be fancy or formal. It can be fun, and every child already has within themselves what they need to create change in this world. So thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And then Idris.
Hi, virtual worlds, digital friends. My name is Idris Goodwin. I am currently, I'm based in Seattle. That's where my mail goes. But right now I am beaming to you from Nashville, Tennessee. This is not my real room. This is an illusion. And it's just great to be amongst my tribe here. This is dope. And it's ironic that we're like, we're talking about diversity, but like we're all coming from different things, but we're united in this I think this shared universal understanding of like, storytelling and the power of that in the lives and the necessity of that in the, on the journey of youth and towards adulthood. And I'm sure stories saved us too. Stories swooped in and got us where we're going to, and still to this day as well. I've spent most of my career in the theater world, but with a primary focus on young audiences. I've been a teaching artist forever. I've been a college professor forever. I was just in Portland hanging out with some kindergartners, first graders, and second graders, and it was a blast. Most of my time is spent at Seattle Children's Theater, which is why I ended up in Seattle. I'm originally from the Midwest. And I have 2 picture books coming out. The first one is, the blur is messing with it, but it's called, there we go. It's called Your House Is Not Just a House. This is my first one, my first picture book. And it's out through HarperCollins Clarion. The second book, picture book, will be out in 2026. So the book came out in May. It's a Taurus. And I've just been having a blast running around with it. And that's why I'm in Nashville. I'm doing a reading tomorrow at Parnassus Books in the morning. So yeah, I mean, in this book, in Your House Is Not Just a House, it's really like more of just an invitation to harness the power of your imagination, on those rainy days or those days when you're inside. It's like, you know, with a little creativity, you know, even these mundane objects can take on this magic and this power. But for me, I wanted to center a family of color in that story. Um, you know, the vast majority of, you know, particularly Black and brown folks, you know, like, you know, it is about like cultural affirmation or it's about history. Very important, very essential. I grew up on, you know, wonderful titles like The People Could Fly and things of that nature. But also, you know, I also love Back to the Future,
Yeah.
you know, and I wanted to be Marty McFly guy. And I also wanted to be, you know, Ferris Bueller's black friend. You know what I mean? So I just like we also so for me it was very important with both these picture books that they feature and center families of color, diverse families of color. But it's about imagination and it's about expression and it's about, you know, sort of indirectly these kind of cultural celebrations, you know. And you know, and then I have a full body of work that is all about those other intersections. But anyway, that's what brings me here today. It's good to meet you all. Big fan.
How exciting! First of all, I think us in the author writing world are jealous that you're at Parnassus. So that's, for those of you that don't know, that's a Ann Patchett's bookstore that she started in Tennessee. So it's just a really special place. So yeah, we're a little jelly.
Represent. I won't let you down.
Please represent. But I think, okay, so I sent you all a list of questions and I may get to them. But I, you know, also let's have a fun and casual conversation. But as you were all talking, some other thoughts came to my head. And so I want to let's dive in there. But, you know, again, I may get to the questions that I actually sent to y'all. We'll see what happens. But I think all of us, as we were talking, is a lot of our stories and a lot of our books, you know, represent some, reflect our own identities, our, you know, anxieties, our celebrations, our joys, etc. So we have these, that's where we get our stories. And you know, like I tend to write about Asian American stuff or things that excite me, geek me. We all do that. But we also come in from a identity place. Natasha, you as well, your books reflect your varied, you know, different identities. And there are some identities we'll touch and some we won't, right? So, you know, I want to get into that. And of course, you know, Allie, I assume you have periods. So, you know, we're writing from that experience. And Idris, the same thing with you with, you know, wanting to reflect having a, you know, diverse, multicultural families. So we have these topics because they reflect who we are. And I'm wondering, I'd like to hear more. And Ali, I'm going to start with you. But I'd like to hear more like why the topics that we chose. And then going back to, you know, how are they important to our heart, right? Like to who we are. And then also, you know, talking about topics that you won't touch either. I mean, there's some things like, for example, I'll start with, not that I won't touch it, but I'm Chinese American, but my family also came through the Cambodian, with Cambodian refugees and the genocide, the Khmer Rouge. And although, you know, I have both those histories in my household and family and upbringing, I tend to write more about my Chinese American heritage than I do about my Cambodian heritage. And, you know, I have stories that I've started and I will, you know, want to tell it, but I don't know, for some reason, I am not, and I think that's also mired in issues with, you know, I'm not close with my family, I'm estranged. I have, you know, a lot of, you know, not, and again, growing up with refugee parents, I had not so great of a childhood. So there's trauma related to that. And so and when you write a story, you are close to it and you know, you're sharing, you're giving away a piece of yourself. So I don't think I'm quite ready for that yet, for that side of the house. So, you know, I think we all have that. So I want to hear, so Ali, your topic, when we talk about menstruation, is definitely something that I feel has been taboo for a long time. And it shouldn't be, because it happens 50% of this planet has a period. kids. So, but, and I think we are having much more period friendly conversations, but it has been banned and it has been something that's been pushed, into closets and bathrooms and, like we can't talk about, but I think what you're doing is really putting it out there. So there's those, you're already addressing a topic that is very like silenced, right? So I want to hear why, how that came
Yeah.
about, and also what you won't touch.
Yeah, so for this book, I came to this story as a parent because I don't know if any other parents are out there, but we have these conversations light years before we think we're going to. So I thought, oh, we'll talk about this when we're 10. No, we talk about this when we're 2 because our children are living with somebody who menstruates, or they have somebody in their life, if it's not a parent, they know somebody who menstruates. And how do you hide this stuff? So what I was coming to the realization was that in speaking of trauma, I had so much pain and shame about my period as a child that I had no idea how to talk about it in a positive way as a parent. And I think one thing that's important is that when we are telling our stories, is that if we can give the gift of maybe separating our trauma from the story that we're telling our children, or find a good way to tell it that includes both the joy of our lives, then I think that's really valuable. So what I kept coming back to in that exploration was laughter, friendship. It was my friends that got me through those experiences, and a chronic illness that's related to my period. And I'm still talking to the same women now who I talked to when I was 11, 12, 13 years old about our first period experiences. So what my goal was with this book was to make it hopefully a friend to maybe a kid that doesn't have someone to talk to or isn't ready to talk about it in a group setting. And that's why I wanted to also make it a comedy. And what's important to me is that a lot of my trauma came from being the butt of a joke, being dismissed, like you're just on your period, or being terrified that someone would know I was on my period or that I had a stain on my pants. And so the jokes in this book, it's the people with periods making the joke. They're reclaiming their humor and joy in the book. And as far as what I won't touch on, I'm not sure, like, again, talking about like how to tell these stories in my own life without just kind of trauma dumping on even like my own kid is my next book involves my childhood illness, which was juvenile arthritis. And I have to tell you, it's a process. It's a process because we're dealing with our own things while we're creating art. And so I don't know what I wouldn't write yet. When you asked that question, I actually thought of something that's, I guess, silly, but like, I don't like bugs. I know kids love bugs. I find dealing with bugs awful. And I know kids are fascinated and they love those stories, but like, it might be something more mundane. Like I won't write about bugs versus maybe I just have to get to the right point in my life for other topics that are tough when I'm ready to, find the joy in them again.
Great, thank you. So Natasha, what about you? I mean, you have so many different identities and experiences that you had shared in your introduction. What are some topics that you're comfortable writing about, and what are some topics that you're not comfortable writing about?
Yeah, I'll start with what I am very comfortable with. I love anything that showcases joy. And that is something that I think is so universal, and it touches a lot of things. And that goes for what I want to read too. I want to read the joy, I want to read the good. But I also realize that not all of life has the joy and has the good. And so I try to find ways to redeem stories of pain into joy. So I mentioned in the introduction that I was adopted, and I actually, in March, I have a book coming out about a little boy who spent a lot of time in foster care. And my background, on top of being adopted myself, I have my master's in social work, and I was an adoption social worker for many years, and just sat with kids who had just gone through it in the system. And I wanted to find something that could give them hope, but not false hope, and not gloss over the pain of what they went through. And I found myself, when I was working in that field, constantly looking for books that I could use in a clinical setting that would help kids realize that they matter as well. And I couldn't find them, so what do? We write them. So that was the reason why I wrote the book that's coming out. It's called Planted with Love. And but I tend to write stories that remind me of something in my own life, or like you mentioned, the stories we write have a piece of us. And so the book that I wrote, The Blue Pickup, this book is set in Jamaica, which is very, very fun setting to use in a book. But it really takes the story of my grandfather's truck, who this is from my adoptive family, and I took that truck and set it in the country of my birth family. And so this is actually an adoption book as well, although you wouldn't know it unless I told you. And one of the things that is really beautiful to me in this story is that I didn't actually get to meet my biological family until I was an adult, but they are just incredible people who welcomed me with open arms. And it's a huge, beautiful, big, loving Jamaican family. And so all the characters in this book are named after family members. And honestly, when I was thinking about the question, what won't you write about? My first answer was snakes, but because I absolutely hate snakes. But what is what if you would have asked me that question years ago, I probably would have said, I won't write about my birth family, because that's such a hard topic and there's so much there and it's so activating to my own emotional state. But what I've found is by actually exploring that and writing about those hard things, it's really cathartic, and it gives me something that I can share with them when there's so much that we weren't able to share together because we were separated for most of my life. And so I really appreciate that question because it surprised me when I was thinking about it, what my own answer is regarding that, because sometimes some of those hard things draw you closer and give you new insight.
Thank you for that. I also think, when we think about reading, especially as teachers, and I know we've got many teachers, wonderful teachers out in the audience, which we want teachers to teach our books, get them in your libraries, your class libraries, your school libraries, etc. But I think sometimes, and I'm guilty of this too, we forget that like they're actually like people's stories, right? Like we think of it as a story, and then I think sometimes we forget that the author's involved. That it's somewhat of a transactional act, like we are putting the story is somewhat from our heart, from our own narratives, from our experiences, from our research. Like we choose what to include and what not to include in these texts. So we're very much a part of these stories. So, I know that we have, in the literacy world, we spend a lot of time not only just thinking about the author's message, but also the author's craft. And I think that is so important. But when we look at craft, I think we really study how it's written, the rhetoric of it, right? But we don't really dig into like what we're talking about here, which is like also our personal lives, right? And how do our personal lives and our personal choices feed into our choices as a writer? So that's an interesting aspect that I think, pedagogically would be very interesting to explore in the classroom. Idris. Okay. I want to get it right. I heard you. So Idris, can you say more about like, how did you pick your topics and what topics would you not write about?
Cool. So actually, the genesis of this bad boy came because it was spring of 2020. We were living in Louisville, Kentucky at the time. My son was in the second grade, and because of COVID-19, they sent everybody out of school. And at the same time, I was invited by Milwaukee Rep Theater Company. They were trying to get all this digital content going. And so they were like, do you want to write something for our digital platform? So I was thinking about my son, and I was thinking about how much he and I like to play games in the house. And we would make little short movies, and I taught him how to make a little puppet theater and stuff. And so there was just this energy of creativity in the house. My mother-in-law lives with us. She's a painter. My wife's a nonfiction writer. So a lot of creativity in the house. So I wrote this poem for like thinking about all the kids who were like suddenly going to be in the house. And I was thinking about like whenever we play hide and seek and he couldn't find me, I would inevitably start looking around whatever little crawl space I was in. And I would start thinking about like if I had to like make something, like if I had to make a robot out of whatever was in this room as a distraction, which I'm sure everybody thinks that. And so out of that came this image that's kind of central in the book, which is this boy, or the child rather, this genderless child standing at this closet. And this is like really when the book sort of kicks off, right? Into its refrain of like that closet is not a closet, it's a teleportation chamber that will take you to a planet with robots screaming danger. And that's what then takes us into kind of like this refrain of like, this is not what you think it is. It's actually like this paper towel, cardboard roll is actually a microphone. And now you're this rock star or whatever, And so I did it first as like just a poem, just like a video poem. And flash forward, was invited to send some work to some publishers to consider for like picture books because I wanted to start doing more of that. And they were like, yo, we really like this. This house is not a house one. And then they brought in an illustrator, Lorraine Nam, who kind of really created this through line for it. And so, I think I've like having children, being a parent, having a creative household, and my wife and I are both coming from families and cultures where like there was certainly a lot of creativity, but no one ever had the foolhardy belief to pursue any kind of like life in the arts. So we're both kind of like, and we've built this family around that. And so a lot of that has really influenced me. I think a lot about, this is what I love about writing for children's theater. I think we're better when we gather together. There's something about that that's very impactful to me. So as of late, I'm just writing a lot about like empowerment, more creativity, more storytelling, like creative lifestyle. Like it doesn't matter if you want to pursue a life in the arts or not, like just you are a human being, which means that you have the capability to be creative. You have the capability you have a story to tell. You have many stories to tell of which you are the scholar of. And because I just think we're our best selves, when we're in that headspace, as opposed to like fear, scarcity, recycled ideas. And so that's just been my kick, my crusade, my little revival that I'm on as of late. Prior to that, a lot of what I was writing, a lot of the work that I write for older demographics, particularly from like 2015 on, I was very impacted. I'm raising boys. I was a college professor at the time. So very much impacted by everything that was going on with, the Black Lives Matter movement and when that began, but also knowing my history and knowing that is the latest, that's the language that we're calling this sickness that America has. We're calling it this now. So I was writing a lot in reaction to that, particularly things to do with my college age students. So I put out something called the Free Plays in 2020. And this was directly after I was living in Louisville. Breonna Taylor happened. George Floyd happened. And, there were all these Black Lives Matter signs in people's grass. And my son was like maybe 7. And he was like, what up with that? And so I just wrote all these plays that were short, and I just made them available. And I was like, you can print them out, you can read them off the screen, you can stage them, you can not stage them, but at least it's a less awkward way to at least get the themes in the room, you know? But in terms of like what I won't write, it's not so much what I won't write about, it's just like, I won't write about anything that I'm not interested in, even if the bag, now listen, if the bag is big, I can get interested. But as we all know, we're all writers. The bag is never that bad. Like even when it's like big at first, you know how many hours it takes. So it's like, it's never enough money actually. So it's gotten easier to turn certain things down. But so yeah, I won't write anything that I can't get, because to me the special sauce is when it's close, when you're connected to it, when it's like your crusade. So it's like, and I tend to go in these like seasons, like, you know, 3 years. Usually it's like 3 years where I'm just doing a whole lot. It's like a campaign almost. And so my next book, which is not a picture book, it's a YA novel in verse. It's all about neuroscience, and particularly through the prism of my own struggles with neurodivergency, and sort of drawn from that story. Now, this first thing is fictional, but in addition to this fictional book, there's a lot of other, like, I want to have like panel discussions, and I want to do a workshop, and so it's like I have like a 2-year campaign that I want to do around this book, but mainly just because it's just a conversation. I want to learn through it. And that's like, I like to increase my own aptitude through like, hey, I just wrote a thing. Now let's go on this journey about creativity and about, you know, the imagination and, you know, STEM and all that good stuff. So anyway, that's me.
Thank you. I want to come back to the bag is big. If the bag is big, I'm going to come back to that. But I do want to follow up this conversation with a conversation about, okay, so we talked about topics that, you know, that we would be comfortable and not comfortable with. But I want to get into the issue of thinking about diversity in children's literature and about non-members writing, right? So it's like, what are your thoughts about people who do not belong to that particular culture writing about a culture? So like, let's say, you know, like a white person writing about a Chinese American. So writing outside of culture. What are your thoughts about that? Ali, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think it depends on the aspect of identity. Like, I could not do that. I am a white author. I don't think I could step into someone's shoes to do that story justice. So I think there's things that we can research, and then there's things that are so endemic to the experience of being an American, and the specific way that certain marginalizations occur in this country, that I think we should leave room for people to tell their own stories. And so I've seen some, you know, I don't know if it's guidance or just general understanding of, when you're writing books, are you writing as a point of view character outside of your identity, or are you writing a secondary or side character, or even someone who's just not point of view? So I think that's what we have to look at, because I think we all want to write diverse stories that encapsulate like the communities that we are a part of and the families that we are a part of. So how do we do that? By making sure that we're not telling other people's stories. And as somebody who writes in first person point of view, alternating point of views, that is, I think, a line that many authors could use. And then this kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier, though, is that, so I am physically disabled. Not every character I write is going to be physically disabled. And not every character that I write is going to share my experiences with chronic illness and with disability. And I would just say, for all of us, we should get to write the full panoply of human beings, rather than being expected to say, you always write and from your identity. I think we deserve to write all of the stories. And I think it's so important that we do this, because kids need our stories to see the full world. So in free period, one of my goals is to show that it's not just students who are menstruating that are affected by period poverty and period shame. Our entire school communities are harmed if you have even one student who's missing class or withdrawing into themselves because they don't have the care that they need. So in this book, boys and others who don't menstruate, they are part of this fight. And there's a struggle with how are they part of this fight? Are they willing to stand up at the school board with the children who do menstruate? Are they willing to put themselves on the line? And so I think it's important to include those voices who you might not think of as directly impacted by an issue, to show in our stories that whatever identity we're talking about, it's not just that individual story. Our entire community has to be invested in making sure that everyone has the care and opportunities that they deserve.
Yeah, thank you. And I think it's, we hear a mantra, especially in a lot of writing workshops and writing lessons, write what you know. And that's not just your personal experience. Like, you can know more because we have access to learning more. But, also, your point about we can't only write about what we know. Otherwise, our characters and stories are going to be extremely one-dimensional. But I think, especially when it comes to cultures and heritages and identities, it's like we need to have special care to examining these positionalities. And I think one of the things, as teachers, and again, I know there's a lot of teachers in the room, it's like I encourage folks to have students when they're reading to also consider the positionalities of the authors that write them and to analyze that. I think that's really important because I don't think it's an issue of non-members not being able to write it, but like, Ali brings up the question I always think about is, should they? Are they the person to do so, right? And sometimes the answer may be yes. Oftentimes the answer is no. And we'll go with Idris. What is your response to this?
Oh man, I don't want to. We're gonna be here all night. So listen, I think about this a lot because I think about this a lot because in the theater world, this is a big one too, right? Because there's this question around there's twofold, right? Like on one hand, it's about the story, the fictional world, the character, but then on the other hand, it's about this actor on stage and if they getting a job or not, right? So if I always appreciate when I go to like a Shakespeare, when I go to like Oregon Shakespeare Festival or something like that, and I'm seeing like a biracial actor in a wheelchair, playing, Hamlet, right? I think that's cool, right? Because look at that representation, look, whatever. But if Hamlet was actually a biracial person in a wheelchair, would the story be the same, right? It is what I call the Othello paradox, which is that like, for a lot of Black male actors I know, like that is the crown jewel, like that is the part, right? But African Americans, Black American, like this association we have with Othello as a fictional character and the Black experience, sure, on some level, but like that is not our experience, right? And and also Shakespeare's problem plays are not good. Like Othello, Merchant of Venice, like these are like not his hits. You know what I'm saying? Listen, I'm getting controversial here tonight.
Yeah, you got some hot takes here.
Yeah. So anyway, there's levels to it. And I also believe like intersectionality is a thing. Spike Lee has created my all-time favorite and my all-time least favorite movies, right? Like I love Do the Right Thing, and I think Chirac is the worst thing I've ever seen. And I would have actually preferred if someone that wasn't Spike Lee did it. Like, could Martin Scorsese have made a better Chirac? Could, possibly, right? Like, could Jane Campion have made a better Chirac? Probably, So I think to me, it is really case by case. I mean, when you get into the commerce of it, right? When it becomes about people getting opportunities, people getting jobs, people getting spaces and lanes, I think that's what I'm talking about. Like, I find there is something a little like the other side when we get into like, okay, now you over here and you, because listen, I read a lot of female characters, right? I read a lot of female identified characters, right? And that is because, you know, this is just, I'm saying this jokingly, okay? I understand that I'm one of like I'm the token male identified person in this space by and large. I'm saying this carefully, but like if there was a like play, like whenever I write a scene in a play that's like a couple of dudes, it's not a very long scene, right? Because men like don't talk, like that is how we're real, right? You know, and so like, and I just think in terms of like the levels and layers of communication, I find female characters, there's just more to sort of work with. I also just hang out with more female, you know what I mean? So that is not something that I would want to feel like I can't do anymore, right? But I also know I have a responsibility. I have to work harder because it is not my physical experience. It is not. So I have to actually listen more, and I have to like try harder, and I have to like be more receptive. So I think I think that's better actually. And it also doesn't assume that I know how to write every Black dude very well either, right? So I think the work of just being a good writer and a good artist, it is like being a journalist. It's like there are certain rules and tenets, right? And for me, like you gotta also I think it's better to be wrong and like actually care that you were wrong and try to do something about it and try to be better, because I do think there is something in the impulse to want to explore, but I just think you have to constantly be checking yourself and you got to try to go about it responsibly. But yeah, you know, we just commissioned a writer at Seattle Children's Theater to write a play about the young life, about Bruce Lee's years in Seattle. Bruce Lee and his son are buried in Seattle. Not a lot of people know that. He wasn't born in Seattle. He lived for a very short time in Seattle, but it had this huge impact. As much as I love Bruce Lee, and as much as I love like history, I know I can't write like that, like because he was such a quintessential. My friend Jeff Chang, the writer, says that it was in Seattle that Bruce Lee became Asian American.
Yep.
And when he said that to me, I was like, an Asian American has to write this play because of what because of that perspective,
right,
and that take. That is why I knew. And I had to tell a good friend of mine who will remain nameless, who was like, "Oh, you should let me write it. You should let me write it. My grandmother was half Chinese." I was like, "You better get out my face." Get out my face.
Well, and I think you bring up several points that I want to touch upon too. Like first, I'll just bring the last one up, is just because you are because you're Asian American or because you have Asian Americanness in your family doesn't mean that you're Asian American, right? It doesn't mean that you know the history, you know the experience. So it's like regardless, all authors have to do the work, right? We have to do the work as authors, and then readers have to do the work as readers and teachers as well. So everyone has to do the work. And you talked about another issue in terms of I kind of simplified it as representation versus experience. You know, so it's like you could see a Black Hamlet, but I love that idea of like, but you know, a Black Hamlet would be a different story based because of the Black experience, right? So we can have, and I think about Bridgerton as well, like with all the representation, it's like you can have these characters who offer representation, but and we suspend belief because we watch Bridgerton, not because we're looking for historical accuracy, but because because it's fun and, you know, whatever. But, you know, they would have, people of color during that time would have had a significantly different experience. And so that, you know, so there's two different things, representation versus, you know, the experience. And I think that, you know, we can suspend belief when we're all on board with the purpose. You know, when we all recognize this is not historically accurate, then I think that's okay.
Right, but if there's dragons in it, like if you got dragons and minotaurs in there, you could put a brother in. You could have
exactly. And I read an article.
A Puerto Rican king. Come on now. And be like, well, it's not accurate to the medieval milieu. It's like you also got dragons in there, fam.
I read an article about that particular purpose too, how like the fandom was upset because there was a Black king or an elf. And it's like, you believe that there are elves. You believe that this creature exists, but you don't believe that it could be black. You know, I mean, it's, yeah, so it's, if you're, yes, that's just racist, right? Natasha, can you respond to this?
Yeah, this is a really good question, and I may have a few hot takes too. Um, so you know, very foundational. I totally agree, right within your lane. But then the question that I have is who's deciding or questioning whose lane it is. So, as someone who has a lot of diversity in my background, I have been told that I'm not allowed to write about certain things because it's not my experience, because people are making assumptions about who I am and what my experience is. I actually even had that situation happen with an editor who questioned whether or not I have the right to write about a Black character. And so this is a really good question, but it's like, at what point do we challenge an author um, and make them have to justify themselves in a world where, if we're talking about BIPOC writers specifically, we've already had to do so much work in justifying why we're even in the room and have a seat at the table in the first place. And so I find this a really interesting topic because it doesn't allow us to really self-identify. And I know there are, real obvious scenarios where, you probably shouldn't have written that because it just is obvious to someone who's not even part of that identity or lived experience. But then I think there is this gray area that we really have to wrestle with when we're having these conversations, because it's not cut and dry. I've even had reviewers say, "Oh, great book, but don't buy it because that's not even her identity." And I'm like, "Wow, that's funny how you know me so well." But yeah, so it's interesting because I feel like there's a little bit of responsibility we have to take on when we're even asking that question, because it's so easy to make assumptions about people in asking them to legitimize their craft, their work, and their identity.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And you know what you made me think about too was this notion of, again, like, we all have to do the work, but I think it's also really important for, again, teachers out there. I'm gonna, push on having your students think about the authors and the content and analyzing that. And these questions it's very layered. Right. I mean, this issue of membership, writing, cultural authenticity, all that stuff, there's no yes, no answer. It's not binary. It's complex, it's nuanced, it's subjective. And I think it's okay to have students live in that. And to have them explore all these different issues. And I think, our pedagogy has so far been very there's an answer. You read a book and then there's answers, right? You ask questions and there's these straightforward answers. But I think it's okay that we have more questions. And I think that's kind of the point for me as an author. It's like, I want people to have to open the conversation and to have questions. And our stories that we write and our experiences are one of many. So, I push against pedagogy that especially with diverse lit, that's around certain heritage months or holidays or things like that. Like, our books should be read all year, and they should have multiple different perspectives that are brought up. And I think that's what brings in the rich complexity of all these issues that we're talking about. And Natasha, your comment too also made me, I always go back to this. I use this as an example, but Arthur Golden's Memoirs of a Geisha. And you read that book and it is beautiful, historically accurate, beautiful. You feel like you're a geisha living in that time. I mean, it's beautiful. Different from James Clavell's Shogun. Or Shogun in the 1980s miniseries versus what we see today. I mean, there's differences, right? And a lot of that's in presentation and representation and whatnot. But, Arthur Golden is a white man. And as I was reading that book, I for sure thought, oh gosh, this has got to be, you know, someone, an Asian American did that, but he is a white man. The different, however, it's like someone like me who looks like me, people would expect like there's more authenticity for me writing it. But Arthur Golden has studied ancient Japanese history. He's a scholar of it. He teaches it at Harvard. I mean, that's his thing. He is more, you know, he is definitely the person to write such a story. But again, I think we should challenge it and question it and talk about it. So, you know, and not that it's not an automatic, like we shouldn't read it, like you're saying, Natasha, we shouldn't read it because he doesn't identify. But like, let's think about, I kind of like what Idris's question is, what would it look like if another person wrote it? How would it change? You know, and what needs to be done, right? So I think all these things are nice questions. So I know we have about 10 more minutes left, and I want to invite the audience members, if you have questions, please put them in the chat, because this is your chance, you know, to have your question answered, and I would be happy to read them and pose them to our fabulous panel here. So please do that. We have 10 minutes left, so please write your questions in. But in the meantime, I'm going to ask a question too, and this goes back to Idris. Let's talk about the bag. So the bag is big is what I wrote down here in my notes. If the bag is big enough. I mean, I think for most of us, we're what I would say working authors. So it's like we have a, you know, we have a day job and then we have our writing job, right? And partly, I mean, I'll start, but I want y'all to talk about your experiences too, and, you know, just share. I mean, of course, I think we all would love to have like J.K. Rowling money and be able to do this full time and, you know, live very, very well. But one of the big things, I happen to love what I do. So I do love my day job. And, you know, it's important to who I am and the work that I want to be doing. But honestly, I mean, it's also benefits, you know, like working in a, you know, as an author, you know, and I am prolific. So that's what gives me, I could make a living full time if I wanted to. Not based on one book, but because I've got, you know, all these projects. That's the only reason why I would be able to make a living. But I won't have insurance for me and my family, and that's the reality, right? Like we've got to live. So I want y'all to share, and I know there are some authors out there that like hate their day jobs. I happen to be one that I love my day job. And I also have a platform because across all my platforms, it's like this notion of sharing and appreciating the Asian American history. So all of my various projects do that. But, you know, so I want to hear what y'all think too, because I do think people out there think that like we're rich. We're not. We'll start with you, Natasha. Let's talk about the bag. Let's talk about your bag.
Okay. So it's not very big. I'm working in a third grade classroom with kids, and the beauty part of that is I get to be around kids all the time, and it's very inspirational, but it's also very exhausting. So when I'm done, it's like, do I even have the energy to write that funny thing that I just heard today? So it's a two-edged sword. So yeah, it is tough. I have to work to, you know, maintain the household and stuff, along with my husband. But, you know, we live in Northern California, and you have to pretty much sell your firstborn if you want to be able to afford life here. And so it's tough. But yeah, I would love to see authors be paid more equitably so that we can, you know, pursue this full time. And at the same time, I realized that, you know, it's, you know, conferences like this that really will help us push our work out there and allow more people to know about all the stuff that we're putting into our writing. So I thank you, because the bag isn't big, but I know that there's opportunity out there. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
So one of the reasons I want to talk about this just because I'm interested. I always am interested in, how the lives of authors, right? But I also want to put out there because we are in a room full of 70 to 80 teachers, and I just want to say, like, as a PSA, is pay your authors. It is hard. I know we all do. We all get requests like, can you come and speak at my school for exposure, or I'll buy one book, etc. It doesn't feed us. So it's like we do talk to your PTAs, etc. It's hard to do free events. And especially those that require travel. Because a lot of times that comes out of our pocket and etc. So PSA, pay your author visits. Ali, can you share more about your bag?
Yeah, I'll just say I have not found a way to make a living doing this. And I think actually when people are in the creative arts and teachers, we have a great opportunity when we talk to children to actually talk about labor rights in the arts. Authors, we are not able to unionize the way that teachers are. So what we have is a guild, and our guild is called the Authors Guild, and it advocates for us. And so on things like non-compete clauses, on getting us paid when publishers won't pay us, we have a guild, but we do not have collective bargaining rights. So I actually think it's a great opportunity to talk to children about labor protections and really what it takes to make a living as an author. And I know like when I was first starting writing and you hear about the 6-figure deal, right? I have not experienced this, but you hear people talking about it. And I was so grateful to hear an author say, I got the 6-figure deal. You cannot live on it. And they broke down what it takes. And so I just want to share this real quick in case it's not something that's been part of your conversation as teachers. But say you got the $100,000. Right off the top, you're paying your agent 15%. Then you are paying your taxes. Now that is split up between when you sign the agreement, maybe a year later when you turn in the manuscript, and then maybe a third payment a year later when that book is actually published. And you have to earn all that back in royalties before you would ever see another dime. So all of a sudden, that $100,000 deal, the thing that gets you in the news, the thing that gets other authors excited, it's not something that somebody could live above the poverty line on for a family and pay for insurance. So I think that we have a reckoning to talk about, and I think it feeds into what we're talking about with AI, the value of human endeavor in this country, and like what it means to create art as labor. Sure. And I think we're going to have a reckoning about what it means for our country and what are we willing to pay for these things as we consume them.
So I'm getting the 2 minutes left, so I apologize. I know some of you wrote me questions, but yeah, not going to get to that. But I do, sorry, Idris, I do want to get to your response about the bag, and then we'll end it there.
Yeah, we got to do a part 2, fam. The people, we got to make time for the people. I love this. This is a very valuable conversation. So Ali and Natasha, I appreciate you guys being real about it, because this is the stuff that, certainly for me, it was just like, your writers have a tough time. Like, don't be a writer. I'm like, but I'm in this Hudson News in this airport. There's all these books. Who's writing all these books then? And people don't know. The average person, unless your parents were a writer or an agent, don't nobody know nothing about that industry. But yet there's books all over your house, right? Like, so I'm like, all these movies and TV shows, these are all coming from somewhere, right? It can't be impossible, so it is, you do need that first and the 15th job, just because our society is built around one kind of work. That's how it moves. So for me, it's like, to your point, Dr. Lohagan, yeah, there are those continuity of life things that you need. So you need that first and 15th job. However, writing, we have to also determine then what is the rhythm and continuity of a writer life. So if we do know Advance is going to come on this day, it's, this is the season where I got to be, banging the drum and selling and trying to make all that money back. Like it's just a different time. Like so, it's like really you're running on two different tracks.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that is the part that's not equitable, right? Like that is the part of society that is biased towards the first and the 15th admin kind of worker. And then the artisan, because making anything that's quality with your hands just takes time. It just takes more time, you know?
And also to your point about like, obviously there's stuff out there, you know, you see all these books and a lot of it, and I think we know in the industry too, like any industry, there's a good old boys club, right? So it's like there are certain people that get to be in it. And you know, publishing houses do have their darlings, and you know, I think that you know, there's a lot. So I think really we rely on you all as teachers, because it's not just the issue of getting, you know, like we write more, get the stuff out there. I think that's important too, but it also needs to be consumed. So, you know, like your demanding increases our supply. So, you know, by buying our books, supporting us, etc., you tell our publishing houses that we want more, and then they will invest in us. But like anything else, they don't invest in things unless they see return on investment, right? So it's like it's a business when it comes down to it. So anyways, thank you so much. I think I addressed maybe a couple of things I told you I would, but we definitely did other things, but this is more fun. But anyhow, I appreciate y'all for being here. Thank you so much. Buy our books, and then I believe Nancy, Lindsay, Carla, I believe that you all are doing some giveaways, and oh, there you go. There you go.
Thank you, Virginia. And thank you, Natasha, Ali, and Idris. That was fabulous. You gave us a lot to think about. You gave us some information that was new to some of us, and many things to consider and share with our students. We will have a short break now, and be sure to join us at 6:55. It's a very brief break, but you will certainly want to be here for the California Young Reader Medal and Eureka Awards.
Tamara, if you want to go ahead and jump in here.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for that author panel. It was amazing to hear all of your guys' stories, and excited to go get some of those books into my classroom. So appreciate that. I am Tamara, and I'm with the American Literacy Corporation. We've sponsored just to purchase 3 of each of your guys' books. So lucky teachers out there will receive those. My name's not on there today. No, that's one of the reasons I love coming to conference, to get new ideas to bring back into my classroom, and just excited that I tell them that I actually got to hear the author speak. So with that being said, if you guys head over to page 18 of the conference program, we honor teachers for their work around literacy. And right now we're offering a $3,000 cash award to teachers and a $500 school grant. So nice way to get some author visits and some money to kind of help towards that. We've done a lot of author visits as well. And then we also give $500 to each CRA chapter if one of their members win. So again, we're looking for teachers who just stand out with literacy and are really just trying to advocate to make students lifelong learners and readers. So, yep. Thank you so much, CRA, for having us. And thank you. This is my 5th conference with you guys, and I absolutely enjoy every single one of them.
Thank you, everyone, so much. We will be back at about 6:55 for our Eureka and CYRM award presentation. Thank you so much.
I would like to also add just a huge thank you for ALC, American Literacy Corporation's generous donation for these books. They have also always been amazing supporters of CRA. So thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Virginia, we are at time, so I'm happy to get started whenever you are ready because we want to respect your time for a full presentation as well.
I'm ready, but aren't we doing, wait, you're talking to me or is there another Virginia?
I'm talking to you. Yes.
Okay. I was like, I'm ready, but I'm only doing Eureka, so I'm like 10 minutes.
Okay. Do you want to give the group another?
Who's doing, I think Melanie, you're in charge of CYR.
Dory. Dory will be presenting. Would you like to give the group another 3 minutes?
Sure.
Okay, 3 minutes, everyone. We'll come back at 6:59.
To make sure I'm.
Why don't we just say 7, Lindsay?
7 it is. Thank you.
I mean, we can be very specific. 6:59 in 3 seconds. Everybody be there.
It's the teacher in me.
Just a second.
But I don't think I usually go after CYRM. Is that not the case this year?
You're up first this year, right after diverse author panel.
Okay.
I have a question. Will you push share or do I push share?
I have the slide, so I can push share.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, am I co-host?
Yeah, you go
Okay.
first. And then it'll be me.
Okay. Well, I will take, I went with how we do it in the past, and I've been told very specifically I got 10 minutes. So that's
Oh,
what
I was
have.
expecting you to have 20 to 22 minutes because I'm
No.
taking 22.
Well, I mean, I can gab, so I have. I mean, I can take up time, but yeah, I'll be fast. I'm just gonna announce the winners.
Okay. I tell a little about each book.
We have 50 books.
That's a lot more than I have.
I'm super excited. Books.
No, I love this part.
2 more minutes, everyone. Join us back in 2 minutes. You won't want to miss it.
I'm gonna hang here
Mhm.
and we get started and it's rolling.
I can. Let's see. We got 1 minute. So I can go back and answer some of these questions that I didn't answer.
And Virginia, you are a co-host now.
Okay. Am I just doing it, or is there an intro?
Let's see. I will intro you if you would like. This is one of my favorite parts of the night, the Eureka Nonfiction Awards. If you're not familiar, this is an award for nonfiction books. They, the committee reads pretty much from March on to September.
July.
Yes, and rating books, looking at books for lots of different components that Dr. Virginia Lohagan will talk about in just a moment. If you are interested, once a year or once there, you do have somebody on a new person on every year. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So you can apply to be on the committee. I have been on the committee. It's a wonderful committee. If you love children's books, you get a lot of them to read. And Dr. Lohagan has been doing this for us for a long time. I don't even know how many years, but it's an amazing opportunity. Get ready, get your pencils and pens ready to start making lists of books that you must have for your classroom. All right, welcome, Dr. Lohagan.
Thank you. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Give me a second to get the screen up. Let me see if it's being weird. Allow Zoom. Okay. Sorry, 1 second. I just realized this is a new computer for me, so it's being really weird. Actually, I'm gonna have Lindsay. Is it you? Do you have the? Are you running the slides or sharing the slides?
I am, but I don't have Eureka's
No,
slide.
yeah, I'm gonna send it to you.
Okay.
I think it's gonna be easier to have you do this and everyone sit around and watch me go in and change systems. And I apologize.
And now they're just gonna watch me.
Yeah.
Your
Lindsay,
turn.
actually, just to make this quick, can you pop me in the chat? Can you pop me your email address? And then we'll go from there. And then I will let folks know. So this has been a very quick process for us because the conference came sooner than we usually host it. So usually we have more time to get it together. So we have the slides and I will share you. We like literally have just put it together. So we are going to share the slides with you. I do not have handouts yet, but we will put up the slides on our website so folks can have that, which we usually always do. But unfortunately, the handout won't be ready until later. And the we do also, Nancy's out there, shout out to Nancy. We also will put an annotated bibliography in our the California Reader in the next issue. So you will have access to these titles, but not in our typical, I just didn't get it together enough to do the handout this time around before the conference, because yeah, usually we're at the end of October, right? Versus the beginning. So I wasn't ready then. But anyhow, here we go. So thank you, Lindsay. So here we are, Eureka 2024 Excellence in Nonfiction. So we have this year, we have 10 golds and 40 silvers. So go ahead, Lindsay. So we have our apologies, our 2024 committee members: Stephanie Jepson, former CRA board member, Robin Radauer Kramer, CRA member, and Tanya Shaw, former past president of CRA as well. And then you have me serving as the Eureka administrator and chair. I also want to point out, I want to pay some homage to Dr. Helen James Foster, former CRA member as well, for founding the Eureka Awards. I want to say like back in 2000, many years ago. So we're gonna talk about the gold awards first. So drum roll, please. And here we go with the gold awards. So the first one is All About the Brain by Dr. Gabriel Dabchek and illustrated by Kim Sue. Next, Cactus Queen, Minerva Hoyt establishes Joshua Tree National Park by Lori Alexander and illustrated by Jen Eli. Copy That, Copycat, Inventions Inspired by Animals, written by Katrina Tangin and Julia Orecchia. Leafy Landmarks, Travels with Trees by Michelle Schaub and illustrated by Anne Lambelet. Listening to Trees, George Nakashima Woodworker, words by Holly Thompson and pictures by Toshiki Nakamura. Magic Counting, Explore the World of Numbers Through the Shapes and Patterns Around Us by Nabil Khan and illustrated by Tete Garcia. Mamie Takes a Stand, a Chinese American girl's fight for school rights, the true story of Mamie Tate, written by Marie Chan and illustrated by Sion James. And then Shackled, a tale of wronged kids, rogue judges, and a town that looked away by Pulitzer Prize finalist Candy J. Cooper. Smash the Patriarchy, a graphic novel by Marta Breen and Jenny Jordahl and translated by Shion Mackey. Transported, 50 vehicles that changed the world. Go back, just so I can announce the illustrated by Rui Ricardo and written by Matt Ralphs. So those are our 10 gold awards. So yay! And before we get into the silvers, I just want to mention that, we read, as Ailish mentioned, we read a ton of books from a variety of different publishers. And it's really, one of the challenges with Eureka is that nonfiction covers a lot of different genres. So we've got, expository text, different topics, science, math, and there's biography, poetry, joke books, all these cookbooks, they all count as nonfiction. And, we also look for our list. We also look to make sure that we're covering different reader levels too, board books, primary, intermediate, young adult. So we like to have our list as comprehensive and robust as possible. So as we're announcing these awards, just keep that in mind, that we really try to think about like all the different types of books that teachers could use in their classroom to address a variety of different topics in a variety of different disciplines. So yeah, and then the one, I know, as much as I love historical fiction, I will share that is a couple years ago, we did stop, we no longer counted historical fiction in the nonfiction category. So that's missing from these awards, because technically those are fiction books. But it's really hard for the committee to get down to building this list and also making sure that it's robust and comprehensive. Okay, so silver titles. So first, A Guide to Grief by Cole and Perry and illustrated by Bianca Jago. A Planet is a Poem, written by Amanda West Lewis and illustrated by Oliver Averill. A Very Asian Guide to Vietnamese Food, written by Kat Nguyen and illustrated by Kim Tai Nguyen. B, Catastrophe, We'll Miss Them When They're Gone, by Marta Magellan and illustrated by Mauro Magellan. Chasing Guano, The Discovery of a Penguin Super Colony, How Nature Works, by Helen Taylor. Extreme Survival, How People, Plants, and Animals Live in the World's Toughest Places, written by Ben Lurwell and illustrated by Daniel Long. Everything You Know About Dinosaurs is Wrong, written by Dr. Nick Crumpton and illustrated by Gavin Scott. Funny Bugs, Nature's Most Hilarious Adaptations, by Paul Mason and Tony DeSales. Goddess, 50 Goddesses, Spirits, Saints, and Other Female Figures Who Have Shaped Belief, written by Dr. Janina Ramirez and illustrated by Sarah Walsh. Growing Up, An Inclusive Guide to Puberty and Your Changing Body, by Rachel Greener and Claire Owen. And I think it is important to note, this topic is extremely important. Our students need to know about their bodies, but as a disclaimer that there are pictures of private parts in this book. Hi Cuba, by Carlos Pintado and Lawrence Schimmel and Juan Jose Colsa. How to Teach Grown-Ups About Climate Change, The Cutting Edge Science of Our Changing Planet, by Patricia Daniels and illustrated by Aaron Blecha. How Do You Turn Data into Drawings? A statistics book about graphs and data, written by, Leighton, gosh, I'm having a hard time reading it. Leighton Tobias Gryden and illustrated by Anamoli Bassani. Jose Feeds the World, How a Famous Chef Feeds Millions of People in Need Around the World. Words by David Unger and illustrated by Marta Alvarez Miguens. Journey to the Stars, Kalpani Chawla, Astronaut, by Lori Walmark and Rocky Murchandani, illustrated by Maitreyi Ghosh. Lift Every Voice and Change, a celebration of Black leaders and the words that inspired generations, by Charnay Gordon and illustrated by Aaron Cargill. Making Sense of Dog Senses, How Our Furry Friends Experience the World, written by Stephanie Guibault Bolt and illustrated by Raz Latif. Magnet, written by Darcy Pattison and illustrated by Peter Willis, How William Gilbert Discovered That Earth is a Great Magnet. Measuring Me by Nicola Kent. National Monuments of the USA, written by Cameron Walker and illustrated by Chris Turnham. Nature, Why We Need to Care for Our Planet, written by Jolie Hanna and illustrated by Amelie Herberson. Ping Pong Shabbat, The True Story of Champion S.D. Ackerman, by Anne Diamatkovsky and illustrated by Abigail Rajunoff. Queer History A to Z, 100 Years of LGBTQ plus Activism, by Robin Stevenson and Vivian Rosas. Rolling On Down the Line, Lady Bird Johnson's 1964 Whistle Stop Tour for Civil Rights, written by Helen Campion and Renee Kreitcher Lyons, illustrated by Aaron McGuire. Space Care, A Kid's Guide to Surviving Space, by Jennifer Swanson. T is for Trails, A Hiking Alphabet, written by Judy Young and illustrated by Charisse Steber. The Girl Who Figured It Out, the inspiring true story of wheelchair athlete Mindy Dentler becoming an Ironman world champion. Words by Minda Dentler and pictures by Stephanie Dehennen. The Observologist, a handbook for mounting very small scientific expedition, by Giselle Clarkson. The Soul Man, Jan Matzeliger's Lasting Invention, written by Shanna Keller and illustrated by Stephen Costanza. Spirit Sleuths, How Magicians and Detectives Expose the Ghost Hoaxes, by Gail Jarrow. Stay Up, Racism, Resistance, and Reclaiming Black Freedom, by Cody Dill. Art by Stylo Starr. True or False, The Science of Perception, Misinformation, and Disinformation, by Jacqueline B. Toner. We Need Everyone, by Michael Redhead Champagne and illustrations by Tiv Bartel. We Sing from the Heart, How the Slants Took Their Fight for Free Speech to the Supreme Court, by Mia Wengen and Victor Bizarre Gomez. We're Not Weird, Structure and Function in the Animal Kingdom, by Michael Garland. Weather, this is board book, written by Rose Nestling and illustrated by Daniela Sosa. A Whole World of Art, by Sarah Phillips and illustrated by Dion MBD. Wildfire, The Culture, Science, and Future of Fire, by Farron Davis Anderson with Stephanie Sammartino McPherson. Worries, Big and Small, A Child's Guide to Talking About Feelings, by Hannah Wilson and Samara Hardy. And You Can Be an Activist, How to Use Your Strengths and Passions to Make a Difference, written by Charlene Rocha and Mary Beth Leatherdale, illustrated by Drew Shannon. And that's it for our silver titles. So we started doing this, I want to say, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, but the committee, again, we go back and forth with titles and we negotiate, and not all of our books get, picked. So we started implementing our committee picks. So essentially each committee member, myself included, picked a title that we wanted to be included, but did not get to be. So next, okay, so these books, yeah, okay, go ahead. So Stephanie Jepson chose Wind is a Dance, written by Deborah Kemp Schumacher and illustrated by Josiah Bisalin. Robin Radlauer Kramer picked A Meerkat Diary, My Journey into the Wild World of a Meerkat Mob by Susie Esterhaas. Tanya Shaw picked Sky Explorer, A Young Adventurer's Guide to the Sky by Day and Night, written by Elizabeth Jenner and illustrated by Anja Suzanne. Oh, this one's mine. I forgot to take it. I was going between these two books, but I'm gonna pick Darwin's Super Pooping Worm Spectacular by Polly Owen and Gwen Millward. And those of you that are, part of our Eureka fandom, you know that I seem to always pick the pooping books. But I also really loved A World of Books. So there's that. But I'm going to pick Darwin's Super Pooping Worm Spectacular. Okay. Next. I think that's it, right? Yeah, so we're done. So thank you so much. Again, stand by, check in on our website. We will be putting up these slides and the handout in our the California Reader for members. We'll have the annotated bibliography in this October, right? Or when is it, Nancy? When's it due?
Okay, it'll be coming out in the winter edition, which will be in January.
Okay. Nancy always has to send me reminders about when this stuff is due. Oh, here's Stephanie. If you're here, so Stephanie's here, then I don't know if Tanya's here. I don't think Robin could make it, but if you're here, yay. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you so much, Virginia, and thank you to the committee members. Thank you so much. I know it's a lot of work, but we appreciate all these wonderful titles. All right, Dory, are you ready?
Dory, you are on mute, if you wouldn't mind unmuting. The bottom left corner where it says audio. There you go. Perfect.
And do I have to push share?
Yes, if you want to navigate the slides yourself.
Oh, no, not that.
So while Dory's doing that, I'll introduce her. Dory is part of CYRM, and she's about to share some amazing titles. And
Okay, we're ready.
Oh, good. There you go. Okay, welcome, Dory.
Hello to everyone tuned in for this year's California Young Reader Medal Award winners. You'll also hear about the nominated books for 24-25. Are you seeing the slideshow?
Yes, I'm projecting it, Dory.
Okay. Check us out on CaliforniaYoungReaderMedal.org, CaliforniaReading.org, and also look for the California Reader, this fabulous publication of California Reading Association at CaliforniaReads.org. I'm Dory Caldwell, CYRM committee member, CRA member, Greater San Diego Reading Association treasurer, retired teacher, current tutor, grandma of 2, and an avid reader. If you are new to California Young Reader Medal Award, CYRM, and the program, we are in our 50th year celebrating great books and getting children to read and vote for their favorite book in one of 5 categories.
It needs to go to the next slide. So,
My tech support. The categories are primary, PBOR, picture books for older readers, intermediate, junior high, middle school, and YA, young adult. So let's get started. Our 2024 award winner in the primary category is Shea Bob by author Bob Shea. Shea Bob, Bob Shea. About the book. An efficient alligator, Bob, sets up a restaurant, Shea Bob, on his snout. He serves the best cuisine available to birds, his target audience, with the emphasis on target, as in his lunch. This is a clever and humorous story that turns our not-so-vicious predator into a friendly restaurateur. So let's meet our author. Just a moment. Bob Shea. Hold on a minute. Pause. Hold on. I'm going to introduce him. Bob Shea is a multi-talented graphic designer, author of many children's books and series, has written for PBS kids shows, and teaches kids and their parents how to draw. I'm honored to introduce Bob Shea to you through this video today, sharing his award-winning book, Shea Bob. And here we go.
It's Bob Shea, and you picked my book, Shea Bob, for your California Young Readers Award. Thank you. I'm so glad that you liked my book that I wrote another one called Pizza for Birds, which is the sequel to Shea Bob, and I hope you like that one too. I wrote it for you guys because you liked the first one so much. I figured I was onto something. I don't know what I was thinking. But thank you so much for the really cool award. I'm so glad that you voted for my book. I have been wearing my award everywhere, and I get better parking places, and people just give me things for free now. My family is a lot nicer to me. I won't shut up about the award. It's all I talk about, to be honest. I'm getting a little annoying about it. Anyway, I thought I'd show you how to draw Shea Bob. How's that sound? As a thank you to you. Okay, so I'm gonna draw Shea Bob with my Bob Shea Bob shapes. So there's Shea Bob. So let's use this one. Okay, you don't have to use stamps. You can just make the shape, but I want to show you how easy it is. The stamps just make it easier for you. Look at that. It looks like Shea Bob already. Not really. I'll fix that though. And I just use, when you draw, you can just draw with any color you want. See, Bob's eye is like a little loop. See that? And you're like, why didn't he fill that part in? That's because that's his hat. I'm going to use maybe I'll use some blue for his hat. It's like a dark blue. It's not real, like that's not really what I use, but it's okay. You can draw with whatever you want. That's why I like drawing so much. Look at that, it already looks like Shea Bob. Should we give him a big smile? Big smile. I also like to, a lot of times I like to give them a little rosy cheeks to make them show that they're a little friendly. Whoever it is. Yellow's not gonna, yellow doesn't show up, so we won't use that. Let's use this again. And then he needs a tail. Boop, boop. You have to do sound effects or it won't work. See, his feet are just boxes. 1, 2, 3, the letter W or an M, depends where you're sitting. Little marks on his thing. Boop. His belly. Look at that. Here's his claw, his hand, his Shea Bob hand. Let's switch it up. I've been using that color too long. Let's make his spikes green. Because it doesn't matter, right? You could do whatever you want. It's your drawing. That's why it's nice. We'll make his teeth green. Let's do his nose table. Tablecloth's usually red, but that one's in the wash, so he made today's orange. Dim, dim, dim. Let's give him a little green vase for the table. A little flower. And there's a little orange bird coming in. His friend. Sans just coming in here. Look at that. Pew. It's got a blue wing. He's pretty. Okay. Give him some grass. Oh, I had this color. I'm not sure what this is. I think it's like an olive green. But you can use whatever. Watch, I'm gonna put in some orange. You don't even have to use the same kind of pencils. Look, this is a whole other kind of pencil. They don't all have to be the same. You can use crayons and pencils together and markers and crayons and whatever you want. It doesn't matter. That's why drawing's so fun, because it's free and loose. You can do whatever you want. Shay Bob. Now you guys can draw Shay Bob. How's that? Oh, wait, let's do a little cloud. And it's green. Boop, 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 boop. There you go. Thanks again for my nice award. I'm really excited. It means a lot to me, and you guys are all really nice. Thank you.
And thank you, Bob. We look forward to your sequel, Pizza for Birds.
Hi, California young readers. My name is Bob Shea.
Sorry.
That's okay. Our second category is PBOR. Picture books for older readers are nonfiction narratives. The subject matter is captivating, though sometimes complex, so children must be of an age or maturity so their attention is sustained until the end. Our 2024 award winner is Elephants Come Home, a true story of 7 elephants, 2 people, and 1 extraordinary friendship. The herd has been traumatized and brought as a last resort to Lawrence and Francois' Thula Thula animal compound. The pachyderms are very angry and violent at first. It's the story of the process, whereby Lawrence wins Nana, the matriarch, over to the side of calm, kindness, and healing, with the most amazing illustrations to accompany the actions of both animals and humans. It's a must-read for children and adults alike. It will touch your soul. In the intermediate category, the winner for 2024 is Across the Desert by Dusty Bowling. 2 lonely latchkey kids, Jolene and Addie, become involved in a live stream video friendship. Jolene watches Addie Earhart from a library computer. When Addie, a skilled but underage ultralight pilot, crashes in the desert, Jolene is the only fan that sees her go down because she is Addie's only online fan. Getting an adult to believe that there's even a crisis is just the beginning, as time is ticking for Jolene's injured friend in the scorching desert. But where exactly did Addie go down? It's a big desert. If this were a movie, you'd have your fist in your mouth and you'd be squirming on the edge of your seat. This is the definition of suspense. Another kind of suspense is that which takes place in our next winning book, Middle School Junior High winner, Alone by Megan E. Freeman. Yes, through a fault of her own, which of course she later regrets, Maddie is left behind when a national security evacuation empties her town of its inhabitants. Unable to get through to her divorced parents, Maddie must take stock of her situation and take action. With a rescued Rottweiler, George, Maddie scours houses and stores to gather resources for the days, weeks, and months ahead. Hunger, thirst, dog packs, looters, a tornado, winter, floods, and injuries are all dangers on their radar. But could loneliness be the most insidious threat? This survival story will have you hunkering down with Maddie, wondering, if this were me, how would I do it? Young adult, YA. Stylish Lena unexpectedly is thrown together with Campbell, the new student and wannabe track star, at a food booth for Friday night's football game. There's a scuffle in the line, born out of hate that turns violent. Chaos results for the whole crowd. The police are out of control, the mob erupts, and soon the girls are huddling and whispering, ducking and covering, hiding, then running together to escape the evening that has turned into a night in hell. Throughout the night, from one frightening event to another, the two begin to dismantle enough of their prejudices to listen to each other. Then each has to trust and rely on a stranger, the other, to perhaps get home. But after collaborating to survive the fiery night, are they still strangers or something else? CYRM was honored to award each of these winners in each winning CYRM was honored to award each winning author of these 5 books a special California Young Reader Medal and the honors and accolades that go along with being chosen Children's Favorite Books of 2024. Congratulations to all of our winners. Now, on to our 2024-25 nominated books. These are being read even now and must be voted on by April 1st, 2025. We'll begin with Are You a Cheeseburger by Monica Arnaldo. A raccoon, grub, and a seed experience the process of planting and growth as they find out if seed will become grub's favorite food, a savory cheeseburger. The anticipation and artwork is so much fun, are so much fun. Luli and the Language of Tea by Andrea Wang. Luli brings a tea service to her kindergarten classroom to share a common experience for her non-English speaking classmates. What was an isolating, scary place now becomes a noisy, chattering party of sharing words for tea, laughter, and their first English word, cookies. My First Day by Pham Nguyen Quanc and Hun Kim Lin. This gorgeously illustrated book carries on through the Mekong Delta on his solo journey past dangers lurking at every breeze, torrent, shriek, and splash. He tunes his mind to the activities, excitement, and joy that await him when he arrives at his destination on his first day at school. Mel Fell by Corey R. Tabor. On her first attempt at flight, Mel, a kingfisher, falls and falls and falls and falls while the other tree's occupants watch, horrified. Mel surprises them all with her rebound and reward. After all, she's a kingfisher. Room for Everyone by Naz Khan. A young boy on a crowded bus discovers that after some wiggles and giggles, there's room for everyone in this lighthearted rhyming book set in Zanzibar. This raucous story doubles as a counting lesson when each occupant carries items that really pack it in. Hold on to your sun hat and head for the beach. Thank you for your patience. Our second category of nominated books is PBOR. This year we have Cougar Crossing, The Gardener of Alcatraz, and Noah's Secret Library. Cougar Crossing, How Hollywood's Cougar Helped Build a Bridge for City Wildlife by Meek Pincus. P22, a cougar, lives in urban Los Angeles near some of the busiest freeways in the nation. He struggles to stay alive. The people who help him must raise awareness of our cougar's travails and gather funds. They're tasked with implementing a plan to bridge a safe passage across Freeway 101 for P22's secure future. This is the cougar's story, and I've seen the beginning of that bridge being built. The Gardener of Alcatraz, a true story by Emma Bland Smith. Elliot Michener, a counterfeiter, gets sent to Alcatraz and becomes the prison gardener. His discoveries are not just about plants, soil, and redemption. His life had changed in this most unusual of places. Noor's Secret Library by Wafa Taranowska. Noor and her cousin started collecting books for their secret library. She wanted to bring about normalcy, allow reading, and promote sharing, and revive a sense of community in her neighborhood during the bombings of Damascus. She called her new library Al-Fajr, which means dawn in Arabic. The library remained a secret for a long time. In the intermediate category, Three Strike Summer by Skylar Shrimp. During the Dust Bowl, Gloria and her family begrudgingly leave the family farm to pick peaches as migrant workers in California. All Gloria wants to do is play baseball with the boys who won't allow her on the team. With her killer pitch and union troubles in the picking fields, Gloria learns about the other kind of strike, that which can win or lose a lot more than a game for the whole family. New from Here by Kelly Yang. Knox, an Asian American boy, begins a tumultuous journey as he fights his roller coaster feelings, trying to keep his family together. He and his family have returned from Hong Kong to the US, minus Dad, at the onset of the COVID outbreak. A new school, learning challenges, racism, the loss of Mom's job and insurance all make Knox more determined than ever not to give up hope of reuniting the home family. The Ogress and the Orphans by Kelly Barnhill. The events within this book are of a small town with a house of orphans and their caretakers and a hypnotizing mayor. When the town is burned down by a dragon, no one seems to care. Then an orphan goes missing, which leads to the citizens blaming an ogress who has just moved in. But is she to blame? Our middle school, junior high nominees, The Blackbird Girls by Anne Blankman. When the Chernobyl nuclear plant has an explosion, two enemies, Valentina and Oksana, are cast off together on a train to Leningrad. These girls arrive at Valentina's estranged grandmother's apartment, where they really begin their education on family history, secrets in countries, and the distinction between betrayal and friendship. My Nest of Silence by Matt Faulkner. Mari is interned at Manzanar and has stopped talking until her brother Mac is back from serving in the 442nd Regiment during World War II. Mac's letters are reassuring to his little sister, and Mari's are a depiction of life without her brother in Manzanar, where people of Japanese ancestry were rounded up and detained. Will Mari's brother make it back, and will she ever speak again? Hold on. The wonder of this novel is its format, switching back and forth between a traditional prose chapter of the camp and the graphic novel drawings of Mac's life on the front lines of Europe. The mental and graphic images stay with the reader well after the book's covers are closed. Simon Sort of Says by Aaron Bowe. Simon is trying to keep his past identity off the radar, which isn't difficult in this national quiet zone where space scientists listen for ET messages for real, but don't allow any internet in the town. Think SETI. While he is making friends with two brilliant children of scientists, his secret trauma of his past somehow leaks. He is the only survivor of a school shooting. When your new friends help to cushion your fall, things can change for the better. Young Adult, YA. I Must Betray You by Ruta Sepetys. In 1989 Romania, under the rule of a communist regime, Cristian just wants to become a writer, but he endangers himself and others to expose the corruption of his country to the world. Will he survive his decisions? Love in English by Maria E. Andro. Argentinian-born Anna is learning English with the help of two hot-looking boys, Neil, a Greek from ESL, and Harrison from her math class. Learning another language, when one is already a poet, opens Anna to explore English with an angle that is both lovely and love-laced. This is a new American love story with the emphasis on New American. Take Me With You When You Go by David Leviathan. Ezra and Bee live in a house with an abusive stepfather and complacent mother. When Bee leaves without a trace, Ezra is in a panic. They must find a way back to each other, how to care for themselves, and how to heal. Sibling love finds a path. California Young Reader wants to thank the following publishers for their donations in helping get these books into the hands of California readers. Remember, one child, one vote. Kids need to vote by April 1st, 2025. Kids choose, kids vote. Teens choose, teens vote. Now that you've heard about CYRM, I'm going to thank you ahead of time for introducing CYRM to every classroom teacher, student, and librarian with whom you come in contact. So read and lead. Remember, today's readers are tomorrow's leaders. Dory Caldwell signing off. Thank you.
Thank you so much again, Virginia and Dory. I'll pass it to Nancy.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Nancy Rogers Zagara, past president of CRA, and it's my pleasure to present the John Martin Distinguished Service Award. The John Martin Distinguished Service Award honors a member of the California Reading Association who merits recognition for outstanding service to the organization. The award was established in 1997 to honor the late John Martin, past president of CRA. The 2024 recipient of the John Martin Distinguished Service Award is Ailish Johnson. Can't think of a more deserving person. Ailish has been teaching for 28 years, 14 of those years in kindergarten. She's a miracle. She holds a master's degree in teaching and was national board certified from 2009 to 2019. She is passionate about engaging young learners in literacy and fostering their natural curiosity so that all students see themselves as readers and writers. Ailish has tirelessly dedicated over 17 years to local councils and state and national councils and reading association. She has been active on the CRA board since 2020 and has really held every job imaginable. She was a chapter liaison, vice president, president, media past president, and now comptroller. She's also been conference chair at 2 conferences, which is really amazing. In 2022, she was the chair for the very successful Connected to Literacy Conference, and this year she's co-chair for our Lifting Literacy. She's always going above and beyond to serve CRA and promote literacy statewide. Ailish is an outstanding team player and is ready to lend her time and talent to multiple projects, from creating a CRA book club, serving on the Eureka committee, or even creating a budget. She's always there for us and ready to serve. Prior to her work with CRA, she was on the board for the Santa Clara County Reading Association. And while living and teaching in Colorado, she served on the board for the Colorado Reading Association. Her work extended to the national level in 2010 to 2012 for ILA, and she was a teacher advisor for those years. She currently teaches kindergarten in Saratoga. Her favorite thing is to do is to read picture books, I guess we couldn't guess that, to her students. Congratulations and thank you, Ailish, for your outstanding service and dedication to CRA. Let's give Ailish a much-deserved round of applause. Thank you, Ailish.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to work with CRA. It's truly a blessing to be a part of this organization. So thank you so much.
And your certificate will be coming in the mail.
We love you, Ailish. We are so glad that you were all able to attend our 2024 conference. Join us for the California Reading Association's annual conference next year virtually on October 10th through 11th. More information will be shared soon, including our inspiring lineup of amazing speakers and our diverse author panel as well.
All right. So thank you so much for joining us tonight on a Friday night. This has been truly an uplifting experience. We at CRA, all of us, really appreciate you setting this time aside to learn with us. And I hope you've gained some inspiration, some knowledge, and maybe like me, a big book list that I'm going to take back to my classroom on Monday and see if I can get someone to buy me some books. Anyway, please join us tomorrow at 9 o'clock for an amazing day of learning and collaborating. It's going to be a really, all of us are so excited about our lineup tonight and our lineup tomorrow. We'll open the Zoom by 8:45 to begin logging on. And if you're in delegates, don't forget to log into that prior. So thank you so much for tonight. And we're looking forward to another amazing day tomorrow.